Chapter 41-21. Yiqing Luo rolled her eyes with a "you're an idiot" expression as she looked at Guardian Fan. I destroyed the corpse in front of all of you. Are you an idiot? Guardian Fan's face turned pale and red from being choked, as though he was infuriated but didn't dare to flare up. Yiqing Luo didn't bother about anyone else. He lifted up the female disciple's corpse and dragged her face, revealing that black face before the eyes of the Linglong Palace's palace master. Linglong Palace Lord, do you think that this poison looks like it was just administered? Yiqing Luo asked with a smile. The female disciples' faces were all purplish-black from being poisoned. It was extremely terrifying. Linglong Palace Lord took a look at the female disciple's corpse. Doesn't look like it. Yiqing Luo placed that female disciple back onto the ground and took out a handkerchief to wipe her hands while saying, according to what Guardian Fan said, half an incense ago, she had seen me humiliating these female disciples, and half an incense later, the female disciples were poisoned. Then may I ask, how did I manage to let these female disciples' poison penetrate deep into their bone marrow in just half an incense's time? When Yiqing Luo asked this question, her pair of long and narrow eyes curved into crescents. But the words that came out of her mouth were sonorous and powerful, like a huge rock, falling heavily on Guardian Fan's heart. Guardian Fan was so frightened that he shivered all over. His eyelashes trembled, not daring to look at Yiqing Luo. His heart was beating restlessly. This young lady obviously looked like she was only 15 or 16 years old. But she had such a strong, imposing manner. Just one gaze, and she pressured him till he couldn't breathe properly. Seeing that Guardian Fan had already lost her head out of fear, and was about to give herself away, Yiqing Luo's brows curved even more, as her voice was suppressed to an extremely low level, so deep that it made one's heart tighten, regarding this. I have another question, why? You obviously saw me humiliating your Linglong Palace Lord's female disciples, but as a guardian, why did you stand by and watch? Obviously you could have stood out to stop it. Why did you take the unnecessary action of running over to the judicial courtyard and calling 3 judicial elders over? Yiqing Luo paused for a moment, her slender fingers caressed her pink lips as she smiled sweetly. Regarding this point, I hope Protector Fan can give a reasonable explanation. Nurse Fan's mind went blank under the pressure of the questions. Actually, these questions were easy to answer. But when Yiqing Luo's pair of smiling yet treacherous cold eyes looked over, his mind was filled with thoughts, but he couldn't spit out a single word. This kind of pressure. Dean Fan had only felt this from the Linglong Palace Master. Cough. Third judicial officer, who had been observing from the side, coughed lightly as he slowly walked towards the direction of Yiqing Luo and the Linglong Palace Lord. Guardian Fan has been in the Linglong Palace for 10 over years, and her loyalty towards the Linglong Palace. I believe that Guardian Fan will not make things difficult for you for no reason. The meaning behind his words was, she believed Protector Fan's words. She also felt that Yiqing Luo had indeed humiliated the new female disciple. Following that, third judicial officer became gentle, as though he was a peacemaker, as he cupped his fists towards the Linglong Palace Lord. Mr. Palace Lord, if both parties insist on their own version of events, then this matter should be investigated properly. We cannot let outsiders see our Linglong Palace as a joke. Her words, although gentle, but the meaning expressed in her words, was extremely obvious. Yiqing Luo was only one person. We have to believe in our own family. If it was because of an outsider like Yiqing Luo, they would instead suspect their own family. Chapter 41-22. Yiqing Luo understood the deeper meaning in her words as her lips curled upwards as she smiled at her. Third judicial magistrate returned the same warm smile. That kind look seemed as though she was really thinking for her sake. The third judicial judge's words soothed Protector Fan's restless heart. She tried her best to calm herself down. Hall Master, I am absolutely loyal to Linglong Palace and to you. I will not dare to say anything false. She raised her head with a look of facing death calmly. Regarding what Miss Yi said, I can explain. As she said that, she looked at Yiqing Luo furiously, not concealing her disgust towards her at all. Yesterday, Miss Yi almost killed mysterious Yan Envy and forced Hall Master Wu Yan to kneel down and apologize. This matter had already spread throughout the entire Linglong Palace. When I saw Miss Yi bullying the new female disciples, even mysterious Yan Envy was not Miss Yi's opponent. If I were to step forward to stop her, I'm afraid one of the 4 corpses would become my position. The judicial court is just next door. I only needed to rush over to the judicial court and invite the 3 judicial elders to uphold justice, but who knew? Guardian Fan kowtowed hard as she spoke in extreme agony. If I knew that she would be so vicious, even if I had to die, I would stop her. These words were spoken with great sincerity. When Yiqing Luo heard it, she felt that she was really deranged, the main culprit who poisoned the new female disciples. Third Judicial Magistrate coincidentally opened her mouth again. All Master, as for what happened later, the other 2 judicial elders and I can also prove. When we followed Guardian Fan over, we indeed saw these 4 new female disciples lying at Miss Ye's feet. She sighed again as she shook her head helplessly. In this kind of situation, anyone would misunderstand. It was inevitable that Guardian Fan would lose control of her emotions, after all. In Guardian Fan's heart, all the new disciples in Linglong Palace are her children. Guardian Fan even cooperated as she hugged her own head and kowtowed hard onto the ground. Between the 2 of them, it left Yiqing Luo with no way out. The second judicial judge tidied up his messy robe and proudly raised his eyebrows at the first judicial judge. The third judicial judge is right. When we rushed over, we indeed saw the female disciples falling at Miss Ye's feet. First judicial judge, am I right? The grand judge's face twitched. He gritted his teeth and said, yes. Seeing the first judicial magistrate giving in, the second judicial magistrate felt even more satisfied. There's no need for any investigation on this matter. Yiqing Luo's intention to kill our Linglong Palace's people isn't just a matter of 1 or 2 days. She patted her sleeves again and looked sideways at the grand judge. Mysterious Maiden Wang's death can be proven to have nothing to do with Yiqing Luo, but Mysterious Maiden Ing was indeed killed by Yiqing Luo. This point is an undeniable fact. Miss Yi, if you really want to prove your innocence, you'd better cooperate with Linglong Palace's investigation. Third judicial judge persuaded Yiqing Luo in a friendly tone. Hearing the 3 of them talking one after another, Yiqing Luo kept a faint smile on her face as her arms crossed over her chest, without much change in her emotions. That was until the 3rd Judicial Division brought the topic back to her. She lifted her eyelids lazily. She raised her hand and placed her slender jade-like fingers by her lips. Following that, she gave a lazy yawn. Chapter 41-23. Miss Yi. Second Judicial Officer's face sunk as he shouted, "Don't think that you can strut around Linglong Palace Hall just because of the Overlord's power. A life for a life is a matter of course. Even if the Overlord comes personally, you have to give us an explanation for this." Yiqing Luo's indifference, as though she didn't put anything in her eyes, really infuriated the few of them. Her tone also became heavier. Yiqing Luo tilted her head as she smiled faintly. Her slender hand slowly fell to the side of her body. The expression on her face was still that indifferent, without any ripples of emotions. Before she could open her mouth, a voice that was as cold as ice spoke. It was light and slow, yet it carried an irresistible pressure that easily suppressed the atmosphere in the area. "Have you said enough?" Just 4 simple words. Even the arrogant second judicial officer unconsciously lowered his head. When this voice rang, it made Yiqing Luo raise her brows in astonishment as she looked at the lady beside her. Since the 3 of them started talking one after another, not giving anyone a chance to reply. Linglong Palace Lord had not spoken a word. At this moment, the moment she opened her mouth, it made one's heart tremble. The Linglong Palace Master's face was calm and indifferent. On her beautiful face, there was an oppressive feeling that made one unable to breathe. Her eyes were as deep as an abyss, so black that it was gloomy. The atmosphere instantly became extremely oppressive. Silence for a moment. Linglong Palace Lord spoke again, "Don't you like to talk?" Why, not continuing. The few of them shrunk back. Even second judicial officer followed suit and knelt on the ground. Amen. To be more precise, other than Yi Qing Luo, everyone else knelt on the ground. This kneel. Yi Qing Luo was like a crane in a flock of chickens. Second judicial officer quietly raised his head as he glanced sideways at Yi Qing Luo, as though he was mocking her for her lack of manners. However, the palace master of the Linglong Palace was obviously angry. She didn't blame Yi Qing Luo at this moment. Anyway, thinking of Yi Qing Luo, this kind of young lady who didn't know etiquette. In the end, she was the one who suffered. But unexpectedly, things didn't turn out like what second judicial officer thought. Towards Yi Qing Luo standing out. The Linglong Palace Master did not have any reaction at all. Her cold gaze was fixed on the few people kneeling on the ground. Since you don't think you're wrong, why are you kneeling on the ground? The expressions of the few of them froze as they could not discern the emotions in the Linglong Palace Lord's tone. No one dared to speak first. The second and third judicial officers exchanged glances and clenched their fists. Palace Master, do you think that the deaths of these new female disciples have nothing to do with Miss Yi? We will come to a conclusion after the inspection. A cold light flashed across the face of the Linglong Palace Master. Following that, she looked at Yi Qing Luo as her gaze was indifferent. What does Miss Yi think? We're in your territory, so naturally we'll listen to you. Yi Qing Luo spread out her hands as she replied indifferently. The Linglong Hall's hall master swept her gaze across the crowd. Soon, a few of the female disciples kneeling on the ground stood up and carried the corpses away. The female disciples were carrying it. The Linglong Palace Lord said indifferently, Miss Yi doesn't look like someone who would lower herself. If you don't want to, I can't make things difficult for you. The meaning behind her words was not to act as though she was forced. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose. This Linglong Palace Lord's attitude. Chapter 41-24. She really couldn't tell what the Linglong Palace Lord was thinking about. The Linglong Palace Lord seemed to be standing on her side. But her attitude didn't seem like it. Moreover, she didn't believe that she didn't kill Mu Qiulan. If the Linglong Palace Lord was standing on the side of the second judicial authorities, this attitude was obviously not right. Yi Qing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as something flashed past her mind. Wait a minute, or perhaps, the Linglong Palace Lord had long seen that the people in the Linglong Palace were in turmoil. The Linglong Palace Lord's attitude was only directed towards the second judicial authorities. It had nothing to do with her. It could be said that this person, if it was anyone else, could do it. As long as she could make use of it to deal with the second judicial authorities, Hall Head Wu Yan and the others who already had disloyalty. She wanted to understand this point. Yi Qing Luo could finally understand the Linglong Palace Lord's unfathomable attitude. Because of the Linglong Palace Lord's intervention, the group of people very quickly moved to the judicial courtyard. It was extremely quiet along the way. Only the sound of careful breathing could be heard. Yi Qing Luo strolled around leisurely as she walked beside the Linglong Palace Lord. As though she didn't care about the results of the inspection. Whereas the few judicial authorities were walking behind her. And Guardian Fan who was swaying as his legs turned into jelly. The Linglong Palace Lord led Yi Qing Luo to the main hall of the judicial courtyard to sit down. Very quickly, a female disciple served hot tea. Yiqing Luo raised the teacup and took a sip. The tea fragrance was rich and it was indeed a top-grade tea. The Linglong Palace Lord also raised the teacup as she flicked the tea leaves on the surface. Her eyes drooped and no emotions could be seen from her gaze. The tea in the teacup was steaming hot, making her face look hazy. Miss Yi doesn't seem to care about the results of the inspection. The Linglong Palace Lord suddenly opened her mouth as her gaze pierced through the mist, looking at Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo shook the teacup and the water splashed in the cup as the fragrance of the tea assailed her nostrils. She laughed lightly, because the results. I had already guessed it. The innocent are innocent. The corners of the Linglong Hall Master's mouth seemed to faintly curl upwards. It was a very shallow smile and her tone was somewhat mocking. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as her peripheral vision shot a glance at those few people standing by her side, as her eyes flashed with some unfathomable meaning. The innocent will be innocent. Unfortunately, there are some methods and there's no way to guarantee that the innocent will be innocent. She put down the teacup and propped up her chin with one hand, half propping herself up on the tea table. Whether or not I can be clear, it will depend on your attitude, Palace Master. The Linglong Palace Lord suddenly laughed. This was the first time Yiqing Luo had seen Linglong Palace Lord smile. She held the teacup and smiled gracefully. His laughter was clear and pleasant to the ears. Yiqing Luo also raised her head and exchanged glances with Linglong Palace's hall master as they both laughed at the same time. His laughter caused the second judicial officer and the others to look at each other in dismay. An ominous premonition rose from the bottom of his heart. But he seemed to have thought of something as he suppressed that feeling from the bottom of his heart. Only the amiable and benevolent face of the third judicator behind him flashed a trace of undetectable, strange emotion. Yiqing Luo just drank her tea quietly, waiting for the results. Approximately 1 hour later or so. Then a middle-aged woman dressed in dirty clothes and stained with blood stains walked into the main hall with a solemn expression. Second judicial officer hurriedly went up to her. "Old Sue, how is it? What poison did those few female disciples suffer from? How long was the duration of the poisoning?" Chapter 41-25. The female disciple was poisoned with a rare poison, the poison meridian grass. Just a little bit was enough to kill a person. According to the results of the examination, the female disciples were poisoned for no more than an hour. Because it was a rare and powerful poison, the poison spread throughout his body in a short period of time. The middle-aged woman read out the autopsy report. Second preceptor and the others all smiled. "I knew it. You were the one who poisoned him, weren't you? Now that the evidence is conclusive, what else can you say?" The second judicial officer sneered and pointed at Yiqing Luo. According to the duration of the poisoning, it was totally compatible with Yiqing Luo's time. It was entirely possible for Yiqing Luo to commit the crime. Basically, it was confirmed that the female disciple's death was related to Yiqing Luo. Guard Fan immediately knelt down in front of the Linglong Palace Master and said word by word, "Lord Palace Master, the truth has been revealed." This subordinate did not speak a single word of falsehood. The Linglong Palace Lord sat there and did not speak. She did not even look at Protector Fan. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. For a moment, the entire hall was filled with a strange silence. After a long while, the Grand Judge slowly walked out. She stared at Yiqing Luo and the expression on her face was rather complicated. "Yiqing Luo. Are you really the one who killed him?" The great judge's voice was a little tense. Yiqing Luo could tell. The Grand Judge didn't ask this because he was worried about her. Instead, he was worried about himself. Because, from the moment they found the female disciple's corpse, the Grand Inquisitor was speaking for her and had shown that he believed in her. If he was really killed by her. In front of the second judicial system, the great judicial system was considered to have lost. This was a result that the Great Justice did not want to see no matter what. What else is there to ask? Old Sue has already deduced the time of the poisoning. Second Judicial Judge interrupted. The time he was poisoned does not mean that Miss Yi was the one who poisoned him. Unless you have evidence or saw Miss Yi poison him with your own eyes. The first judicial judge's face darkened when he heard the second judicial judge's voice. She turned her head towards Yiqing Luo and asked once again, Miss Yi, you're not the one who killed him, right? Before the second judicial judge could speak. The judge was asking if she was the one who killed the man. Now, the judge was asking whether she was the one who killed him or not. Was the first judicial officer using her as a tool to deal with the second judicial officer? Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she gave a mocking smile. Seeing the sneer in her eyes, the great judge felt a little guilty. All right, don't interrogate a little girl like that. The third judicial judge had a warm smile on his face. He put one hand on the first judicial judge and the other on the second judicial judge. It's very simple to prove that Miss Yi didn't poison him. As long as we can prove that Miss Yi doesn't have the poisonous scripture grass on her, isn't it? What kind of proof is this? The second judicial judge flicked his sleeves. After she poisoned it, she might have thrown the poisonous meridian grass away. When we rushed over with Protector Fan, it happened to be the time when the female disciples died. During that time, she didn't have the time to destroy the evidence, the third judicial judge said. So this point can still be proven. When the second judicial judge heard this, he turned his head and snorted coldly, but he didn't refute. Third judicial judge beamed at Yiqing Luo, Miss Yi, I'll have to trouble you to cooperate. Saying that, the three judges took the initiative to walk towards Yiqing Luo. Before they even got close. Chapter 41-26. Third judicial magistrate stopped in his tracks and explained with a smile, just checking, it won't hurt you. Yiqing Luo snorted lightly as she leaned against the back of the chair. She bent her elbow and propped up her chin as she looked at third judicial magistrate. No need to check. Miss Yi. What do you mean? Third judicial magistrate asked in puzzlement. Yiqing Luo raised her brows. I do have the poison scripture grass on me. The moment she said that. At that moment, the surrounding people all sucked in a breath of cold air. Each of them looked at Yiqing Luo in astonishment. Was this admitting? Second judicial magistrate laughed out loud as he looked at first judicial magistrate complacently. Did you hear that? She has already admitted. Ha ha ha. First judicial magistrate, you have been helping a murderer. And the person she killed is from Linglong Palace. Second judicial magistrate paused and sneered. From what I see, you, first judicial magistrate, don't treat our Linglong Palace's disciples seriously. First judicial magistrate's face darkened. She clenched her fists tightly to suppress the rising heat as she stared coldly at second judicial magistrate. She wanted to refute but couldn't say a word. Second judicial magistrate felt even more annoyed when he saw this. He cupped his fists tightly and knelt down in front of Linglong Palace Master. Palace Master. This person has hurt our Linglong Palace's disciples many times. Now that the evidence is conclusive, would Palace Master please give the order to kill Yiqing Luo? This. Third judicial magistrate was shocked as he wanted to persuade second judicial magistrate. But he looked at Yiqing Luo helplessly. Finally he sighed heavily. Miss Yi, how can you do this? If you have any dissatisfaction with Linglong Palace, you can tell the first judicial magistrate clearly. As she said that, she closed her eyes with a pained look. That is at least a fresh life, and so young. I can't plead for you anymore. Plead for what? Men, suppress this murderer who killed Linglong Palace's disciples. We must use her blood to pay tribute to the dead disciples. Second judicial magistrate clamored. Pfft. In this heavy atmosphere. A melodious laugh rang out, and it was extremely obvious. Everyone was stunned by this laughter. He immediately looked in the direction of the voice. The girl sitting on the chair covered her lips with her slender, jade-like hand. She was smiling so brightly that it was as if she was a beautiful flower. A pair of enchanting eyes curved into a long and narrow arc because of her smile. It was like a poppy in full bloom, slowly blooming at the end of his eyes. The girl slowly sat up straight. Her posture was elegant and noble. His every movement exuded an aura that caused others to tremble in fear. "What are you laughing at?" The second judge frowned and scolded. Yiqing Luo curled her lips and smiled sweetly. "I can't help but want to laugh at your words." "What do you mean?" Yiqing Luo's eyes were full of ridicule. "Those who don't know would think that my relationship with the third judicial officer is so good. It seems that, from the beginning to the end, other than putting all the blame on me, you haven't done anything to plead for me, have you?" She made no effort to hide her sarcasm. It also directly moved the purpose of the tripartite justice system to the surface. "Don't you like to pretend to be a good person? Don't you like to smooth things over?" Then he would expose all of her intentions. Let's see how she could continue to pretend. As expected, the amiable and kind face of the third judicial judge suddenly froze. Her mouth moved. Chapter 41-27. "Miss Yi, do you have any misunderstanding towards me?" The third judicial magistrate adjusted his emotions and asked. Yiqing Luo's slender fingers brushed over her lips. Immediately, she stood up slowly. The moment she stood up, the powerful and majestic aura emanated from her body. Obviously, she looked petite and harmless. But in her charming eyes and smile, it made one's back inexplicably cold. Yiqing Luo curled her red lips. "Whether it's a misunderstanding or not, you know it clearly." "Miss Yi." The third judicial magistrate's face stiffened and his expression was extremely ugly. "I am absolutely not that kind of person." Pfft! Yiqing Luo's pink lips deepened. The corners of her long and narrow eyes revealed a trace of coldness, like a stream of ice and snow. "I have no interest in what kind of person you are," she said. "It's just disgusting that you are putting on airs in front of me. If you like to maintain your good guy image, then stay away from me." The third judicial magistrate was infuriated. A murderous intent surged uncontrollably in his pair of dark eyes. Although it quickly disappeared in front of his eyes. But this murderous intent, Yiqing Luo could still see it clearly. She curved her lips. She couldn't control her emotions and couldn't help it. Her psychological quality was still too poor. "Yiqing Luo." The second judicial magistrate stepped forward and pulled the third judicial magistrate behind him, then stared at Yiqing Luo angrily. "What kind of person is the third judicial magistrate? We Linglong Palace know best. Don't think that you can bewitch the first judicial magistrate and sow discord between us and the third judicial magistrate." She sneered, her eyes were filled with hatred. "Don't think that deliberately targeting the third judicial magistrate, you can overturn the fact that you killed 4 Linglong Palace's female disciples." The moment the second judicial magistrate finished his words, immediately, those Linglong Palace's female disciples who were surrounding the main hall were suddenly enlightened. This was Yiqing Luo's purpose? Deliberately provoking the feelings between the judicial magistrates. And then using this to shift everyone's attention away from the new female disciples. Indeed a sinister and cunning woman. Suddenly, among the female disciples, someone knelt down. She shouted loudly, "Hall Master, please uphold justice for Linglong Palace." The moment the words came out, the dozens of female disciples surrounding them were immediately spurred on. In addition to what the second judicial officer had just said. One by one, they knelt on the ground. Hall Master, please uphold justice. Hall Master, please avenge our dead sisters. Hall Master. For a moment, the strangely silent hall became noisy. When the second preceptor saw that there were so many female disciples cooperating with him, he immediately felt very confident. He raised his head high and sneered at the big hand, "Take him away." Soon, the female guard rushed into the hall. One by one, they bowed towards Ling Long Palace Lord, who was seated on the main seat, and went up to detain Yiqing Luo. However, they had just taken a step forward. A cold and mocking voice sounded, "So, in your eyes, I am still the Hall Master. You even know to bow to me." Every single word was heard clearly by his ears. It was as if a heavy boulder was pounding on everyone's heart. The moment the Palace Lord of the Ling Long Palace spoke, at that moment the entire hall fell silent. The expressions of the second judge, Protector Fan, and the others who had been arrogant and pleased with themselves froze on their faces. Everyone's heart thumped furiously. Hall Master. What did this mean? Under the strange atmosphere, it was silent for several breaths. Chapter 41-28. Second Judicator knelt down. That frightened the surrounding Ling Long Palace's female disciples all knelt down. Hence, it was the same as before. Everyone knelt down on the ground. Yiqing Luo stood out like a crane among chickens. Her lips curled up as she slowly turned sideways and smiled at Ling Long Palace Lord. "Actually, I also feel that. They are treating you as a decoration." Yiqing Luo. Second Judicator shouted angrily, "Stop spouting nonsense over there." After he shouted, he immediately looked at the Ling Long Palace Lord with fear and trepidation. "We are absolutely loyal to the Palace Lord. She's the one who's sowing discord." Yiqing Luo smiled as she raised her slender eyebrows. The smile in her eyes added some unknown deeper meaning. "Really? Why is it that when I'm here, listening to your long-winded talk, I feel..." Second Judicator, you are more like the Ling Long Palace Lord. Yiqing Luo's tone was frivolous. She said it in a casual manner. But the words between the words made one's heart palpitate. Second Judicator was so frightened that his face turned pale. "Yiqing Luo, don't slander me. You're intentionally discrediting me in front of Lord Palace Lord." She was more like the Ling Long Palace Lord. If these words were said in private, she would absolutely be filled with delight. She had always felt that she was the one who could truly take up the position of Ling Long Palace Lord. But these words were placed in the open. Especially in front of Ling Long Palace Lord, if she provoked Ling Long Palace Lord to think too much. Ling Long Palace Lord started to be suspicious of her. Could her days in Ling Long Palace Lord still be smooth sailing? Yiqing Luo, that slut, how ruthless. Second Judicator was so infuriated that his chest felt stuffy, about to throw up blood. "Lord Palace Lord, I'm innocent. She's intentionally sowing discord, you mustn't believe." "Enough." Ling Long Palace Lord squinted her eyes in displeasure, reflecting a chilly glint, like ice and snow, freezing the surrounding air. Ling Long Palace Lord's expression turned ugly. A pair of eyes that seemed to be covered with frost contained a bit of inexplicable coldness. After stopping the second trial, she raised her eyes and met Yiqing Luo's gaze as she spoke out coldly, Enough, stop stirring up trouble over there." Yiqing Luo shrugged her shoulders, raised her hand and made a zipper action on her mouth. After that, he pursed his lips and returned to his seat beside the Ling Long Palace Lord. "Lord Hall Master." The second Hall Master shrunk his neck. The Ling Long Palace Lord glanced at the second and third judges indifferently before raising her eyes and sweeping her gaze over the people kneeling on the ground in front of her. "All of you are making a ruckus over a little girl. Where is your sense of propriety?" No one dared to make a sound. The Linglong Palace Master's gaze was sharp, and the pressure of a superior person pressed down heavily. The air in the entire lobby became thin. Everyone felt suffocated. However, he did not dare to show any emotions. Fear was written all over everyone's face. Only Yiqing Luo, who was seated by the side, still had that lazy expression on her face, as though she didn't care about anything. Su Xiao. Linglong Palace Lord opened her mouth again. Su Xiao, who was kneeling by the side, the lady in charge of the autopsy, responded, "I'm here. Check if Miss Ye's body has been contaminated with the poison scripture grass." Linglong Palace Lord instructed calmly. Su Xiao kowtowed expressionlessly, "Yes." Following that, she stood up and walked towards Yiqing Luo. This time, Yiqing Luo didn't evade. She was extremely cooperative. Chapter 41-29. After the inspection, Su Xiao returned to his original position and continued to kneel down. "How is it?" Linglong Palace Lord asked. Su Xiao replied respectfully, "I did not find any traces of the poison scripture grass on Miss Yi." Linglong Palace Lord's gaze swept towards Second Judicial Magistrate. "Second Judicial Magistrate, did you hear me clearly?" Second Judicial Magistrate shuddered, "Yes, I heard you clearly." Su Xiao. The Linglong Palace Master softly called out. Su Xiao seemed to understand the meaning of the Linglong Palace Master's words. He expressionlessly said, "The poison meridian grass is extremely poisonous. So, if someone comes into contact with the poison meridian grass, their body will definitely be contaminated with its aura. No matter how careful the person who poisoned it is, there would definitely be traces on their body." Su Xiao's explanation. Which meant that Yiqing Luo's disgust was completely excluded. Second Judicial Magistrate raised his head and widened his eyes as he pointed at Yiqing Luo. You are intentionally framing me. Rejecting the Third Judicial Magistrate's inspection. And admitting that she had the poison scripture grass on her. Intentionally teasing them. Yiqing Luo shook her head with a grin. "What I said is the truth. I do have the poison scripture grass on me, but I didn't take it out." She touched the Netherworld Phoenix ring on her fingertip. "As for me, not only do I have the poison scripture grass, but I also have many other poisons that you can name or can't name. Do you want to try? She was a pill master. If she didn't have some random poison on her, she would be embarrassed to call herself a pill master, all right? Second Judicial Magistrate's face twitched as his breathing quickened. His face was green, red and black. Palace Lord. The reversal of the situation made First Judicial Magistrate smile. She crawled a few steps forward and cupped her hands towards Linglong Palace Lord. "The 4 new female disciples died because of the poison scripture grass. Since Miss Ye's innocence has been confirmed, the murderer must be someone else." She pointed to Second Judicial Magistrate. After the news was released, Second Judicial Magistrate had been insisting that Miss Yi was the murderer who poisoned the female disciples. "I feel that Second Judicial Magistrate and Guardian Fan are trying to frame Miss Yi, so I suggest that Su Xiao also check Second Judicial Magistrate and Guardian Fan." Nonsense. Second Judicial Magistrate stared at First Judicial Magistrate in anger. "How could this elder poison my own disciple? Whether it's you or not, we'll know after the inspection." The Great Justice snorted. "Fine, I'll check." The second judge glared angrily at Su Xiao. "You, check. Make him sincerely convinced." Su Xiao looked at the Linglong Palace Master. The Palace Master of the Linglong Palace nodded. He stood up and walked towards the Second Judicial Elder. "Second Judicial Elder, please excuse me." Su Xiao stretched out his hand towards the Second Judicial Officer. Suddenly, a cry of surprise rang out from the crowd. "Guardian Fan. Protector Fan is dead. What's going on?" How did Guard Fan die? The female guards kneeling on the ground looked at Protector Fan, who had suddenly fallen, and let out panicked cries. It's poison. She took poison. Poison meridian grass. After Nurse Fan fell to the ground, she slowly saw a patch of purplish-black color spread over her face. Just like the 4 female disciples who had died earlier. Protector Fan's death shocked everyone. Su Xiao immediately walked towards Guard Fan and felt her pulse. After a while, she shook her head at Linglong Palace Lord. Guard Fan consumed the poison scripture grass and died from the poison. The poison scripture grass was found on her fingers. This was because Su Xiao wanted to check her and second judicial magistrate. Chapter 4130. Second judicial officer had quick reflexes. After realizing this point, she immediately changed her expression as she looked at Guardian Fan's corpse in astonishment. It's her. She poisoned those 4 female disciples. Second judicial officer panted heavily as her hands trembled as she pointed at Guardian Fan before her eyes widened as she looked at third judicial officer. We were all cheated. The tripartite judicial system was also stunned by the sudden change in the scene before them. After hearing what second judicial officer said, only then did she come back to her senses. She immediately kowtowed to Linglong Palace Lord, it's Guardian Fan. Guardian Fan made use of us. Everyone was taken aback when they heard this. Looking at the 2 judicial officers kneeling on the ground and then at Guardian Fan's corpse. It seemed. Right from the start, it was indeed Guardian Fan who swore that she saw Yiqing Luo bullying the female disciples. Then she specially looked for the judicial elder to stop Yiqing Luo. But she coincidentally saw the scene of the female disciples collapsing at Yiqing Luo's feet. From then on, they all felt that the murderer was Yiqing Luo. So, from the start to the end, it was all Guardian Fan's doing. She herself poisoned the female disciples and shifted the blame to Yiqing Luo. In this way, everything could be explained clearly. Linglong Palace Lord looked quietly at the 2 people kneeling on the ground. Her expression was indifferent. He really couldn't tell what she was thinking in her heart. Linglong Palace Lord remained silent. Second judicial officer and third judicial officer were feeling apprehensive. Linglong Palace Lord remained silent. The others in the main hall didn't dare to speak either. The atmosphere was so strange that it started to fill the air. It was so oppressive that everyone felt suffocated. Then, the Linglong Palace's palace master's finger lightly tapped on the table. A soft, dong sound was heard. Like a bell, it fell on everyone's heart. Usually, your thoughts are deeper than the other. The palace master of the Linglong Palace chuckled and a sharp light flashed in her eyes. A mere palace master is able to play you all around. This makes this palace master have no choice but to reconsider whether you all have the ability to take on such an important role as justice. Linglong Palace Lord's words were spoken very softly. But it was a tone that could not be refuted. When the second judicial judge and the third judicial judge heard this, they were so shocked that they felt as if a boulder was pounding on their chests. Their fingers curled up and their bodies tensed up. Palace Master, we are only concerned about the Linglong Palace and the chaos. After this lesson, we definitely won't do it again next time. As they spoke, the 2 of them kowtowed to the ground. Ever since Yiqing Luo arrived at Linglong Palace, the Linglong Palace Lord's attitude was obviously not right. From the very beginning, they had a feeling. The Linglong Palace's palace master seemed to want to make a move on them, the main hall's hall masters. However, a guess was just a guess. Hearing the palace master of the Linglong Palace mention that they would be considering their positions, it was a completely different feeling. They had spent most of their lives in the Linglong Palace. If they were to be stripped of their judicial positions now, what face would they have left to remain in the Linglong Palace Hall? Linglong Palace Lord's gaze unnoticeably shot a glance at Yiqing Luo as she spoke calmly, "The person whom you need to apologize to is not me." Second Judicial Officer's body stiffened as he abruptly looked towards Yiqing Luo. In the depths of his eyes, a hurricane was surging. Chapter 41-31. On the other hand, Third Judicial Magistrate immediately put on a smile and turned her kneeling position towards Yiqing Luo. "Miss Yi, I'm old and muddled, believing in Guardian fans' nonsense, so I misunderstood you." Her voice trembled slightly and her tone was apologetic at the right time. She knew when to yield and when to stand tall. Third Judicial Magistrate's apology made Second Judicial Magistrate's expression stiffen. Asking her to apologize to a stinky lass who was still wet behind the ears. How could she possibly do it? Second Judicial Magistrate's entire being was resisting to apologize to Yiqing Luo. But when she raised her head and wanted to express her grievances to Linglong Palace Lord. But she met with Linglong Palace Lord's sharp gaze. That heavy gaze made Second Judicial Magistrate's heart tighten. His pupils dilated unconsciously. Finally, under the humiliation and unwillingness, she slowly moved her direction and knelt towards Yiqing Luo. Only, before she could squeeze out an apology from the slits of her teeth. Yiqing Luo's lips curled upwards as she gave a lazy smile. "There's no need to apologize." Second Judicial Magistrate swallowed back the words that were about to come out of her mouth as she silently thought, at least she had some eyesight. She knew that she couldn't accept her apology. This thought had just flashed past her mind. She heard the young lady's next sentence, which was mixed with a clear and melodious laughter. "Apologies against one's conscience, I've heard too many of them and it's scary. I don't want to face 10 overkillers when I wake up at night." She put on a posture as she patted her chest. "As for me, I'm just a weak young lady and I'm very timid, so I'll be afraid." Second Judicial Magistrate's face instantly turned gloomy upon hearing Yiqing Luo's words. Her body stiffened as her eyes stared unblinkingly at Yiqing Luo. The bottom of her eyes was filled with viciousness. "Miss Yi, how could this be an apology against one's conscience?" Third Judicial Magistrate's amiable voice was heard as she leaned forward and bumped into Second Judicial Magistrate imperceptibly, reminding her. Immediately after, he looked at Yiqing Luo with an amiable smile. "This matter is indeed my and Second Judicial Officer's fault. We are also sincerely apologizing. We should not just listen to what we see on the surface and make arbitrary judgments. This matter has also taught us a heavy lesson. If Miss Ye's anger cannot be appeased, we are willing to accept punishment as our apology to you, and the tuition fees for this training." The third judicial judge's words were very beautiful. His feelings were deep and sincere. It sounded like a sincere apology. He also made it clear that he was wrong. It also showed that through this lesson, he had reflected on it and would definitely correct himself. In that case, this was also a hint to the palace master of the Linglong Palace not to give up their positions so easily. Yiqing Luo's lips curled upwards, her eyes were extremely clear. He was not affected by the words of the third judicial judge at all. She still held her chin lazily, raised her slender eyebrows, and looked at them with a faint smile. That look. It was obvious mockery. The second justice was already filled with resentment. After seeing Yiqing Luo's expression, he was even more unresigned. "Yiqing Luo, why must you be so overbearing? We've already apologized, what more do you want?" She was extremely infuriated as she shouted harshly. This sharp shout. Instantly, it caused all movement around to quiet down. The third judicial judge's smiling face froze. She really wanted to kick this pig-like teammate to death. Chapter 41-32. Actual harm. Yi Qing Luo couldn't help but burst out laughing, bringing me to Linglong Palace Hall without any explanation, and then your mysterious fairy came looking for trouble, and then inexplicably framing me. Her long and narrow eyes rose slightly, forming an arc with a layer of coldness. I am after all a 15-year-old young lady, the trauma to my heart is greater than anything else. You. The second judicial officer trembled in anger when she heard this obvious nonsense. If Yi Qing Luo's heart was hurt, she wouldn't believe it even if she was beaten to death. Even if her heart was hurt, Yi Qing Luo wouldn't feel any trauma at all. The second judicial officer was speechless. The third judicial officer lowered her head as her eyes sunk slightly. A cold glint flashed across his covered eyes. How could she not hear it? Yi Qing Luo's words were intentionally conveying her grievance to the Lord of Linglong Palace Hall. Grievance? When had Yi Qing Luo ever been wronged? If it wasn't for Yi Qing Luo who took the initiative to follow the judicial officer to Linglong Palace Hall. Based on Yi Qing Luo's character, who could bring her to Linglong Palace Hall? This was also why. Since Yi Qing Luo arrived at Linglong Palace Hall yesterday, she was arranged to stay next to the judicial courtyard, and the judicial officer would occasionally go over to Yi Qing Luo. Moreover, yesterday, Wu Fu Air came looking for trouble. Wasn't she carried down in the end? And Yi Qing Luo didn't receive any punishment. Instead it was Wu Fu Air who almost lost her life, and even implicated Hall Master Wu Yan to be punished. Today, the so-called framing, Yi Qing Luo was an outsider right from the start. She was in a state of watching a show from the start, completely sure that she was safe and sound. She had the cheek to say that she was wronged. The ones who were wronged were them, right? But no matter how turbulent the third judicial officer's heart was, they were unable to calm down. At this moment, they didn't open their mouths to express any feelings. Miss Yi. Suddenly, the Lord of Linglong Palace Hall opened her mouth slowly. Her voice was deep and cold, without any ripples. Yi Qing Luo raised her brows as she looked at the Lord of Linglong Palace Hall. It seems that Miss Yi has a lot of complaints about the Linglong Palace, said the Linglong Palace Lord in a very calm voice. Yi Qing Luo raised her eyebrows as she raised her teacup and took a sip. After the Linglong Palace Master asked that question, the entire hall was dead silent. Yi Qing Luo lifted the cup and the sound of the teacups colliding against each other was extremely clear. Everyone couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. It was until Yi Qing Luo placed the teacup down when she met Linglong Palace Lord's gaze with a smile. That's right, there are a lot of complaints. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. In front of the master. Even if he had complaints in his heart, he couldn't say it out loud. Everyone looked at the Linglong Palace Lord with trepidation, fearing that the Linglong Palace Lord would fly into a rage. Unexpectedly, the Linglong Palace Lord laughed in a low voice. The smile on her face, which she pretended to be old and mature, actually showed a little bit of her beauty. Since that is the case, this palace master will have to take responsibility for it, said the Linglong Palace Master with a light smile. Just as she finished speaking, her gaze suddenly changed. She coldly swept her gaze over the people kneeling in front of her. As members of the judiciary, you listened to slanderous rumors and injured others without any evidence. Furthermore, you have no intention of repenting. Chapter 4133. Second Judicial Officer's eyes were filled with shock as she looked at Linglong Palace Lord in disbelief. She opened her mouth wide as she couldn't believe what she had heard. However, the Linglong Palace's palace master's ice-cold expression and frost-like gaze that landed on her body caused the doubts and unwillingness in her heart to become stuck in her throat. It was like that icy cold gaze grabbed her by the throat, making her unable to say a single word. Linglong Palace Lord's icy cold gaze slowly shifted onto the third judicial officer. That serene gaze made the third judicial officer tremble as her entire body tensed up as she knelt straight. Linglong Palace Lord stared at the third judicial officer as she spoke in a deep voice. Third judicial officer, on account that you have a good attitude in admitting your mistake, you shall face the wall and reflect on your mistakes. After you have thought it through, come see me again. The third judicial officer's eyes were filled with gratitude as she immediately knelt down as her forehead pressed against the ground. Her voice was trembling as she replied in ecstasy, "Thank you, Palace Lord." Following that, she shifted towards Yi Qing Luo's direction. "Thank you, Miss Yi." After thanking Yi Qing Luo, she slowly raised her head as she was filled with gratitude as she used a sonorous and forceful voice to speak. "I am willing to go to Linglong Palace Hall to copy Buddhist scriptures, to wash away my vicious aura and also to pray for Palace Lord and Miss Yi." Third Judicial Officer's sincere and serious words. Compared to the shock and astonishment on the second judicial officer's face, as well as that venomous gaze towards Yi Qing Luo, it formed a sharp contrast. After the third judicial officer expressed her attitude, Linglong Palace Lord's red lips curled slightly as she looked at Yi Qing Luo. "Miss Yi, feel that what I have done is considered as being responsible for you." Since Linglong Palace Lord opened her mouth, Yi Qing Luo crossed her arms as she leaned against the back of the chair lazily. Her long and narrow eyes squinted slightly as her brows exuded a bewitching look. Especially now, when she heard Linglong Palace Lord's question, she slightly turned her eyes sideways. That exquisite side profile made one's heart palpitate. But that palpitate revealed a kind of nervousness which made their hearts tighten abruptly. Yi Qing Luo lazily lifted her eyelids as her lips curled upward slightly as she looked at Linglong Palace Lord with a smile which didn't look like a smile. If Palace Lord feels that this is considered, then so be it. She naturally understood the reason behind the Linglong Palace Master's actions. Although the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace seemed to be helping her on the surface, but in the end, she was the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace. Compared to an outsider like her, the disciples of the Linglong Palace were the ones that the Linglong Palace Master wanted to protect. In order to give her an explanation, and to protect the disciples of the Linglong Palace, the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace had purposely taken the initiative to propose the punishment for the two judges. Moreover, the punishment was neither light nor heavy. In any case, he had spared their lives. Even though the Linglong Palace's Palace Master had made it sound so serious, the truth was that she had managed to protect those two's judicial positions. The moment the Linglong Palace Master opened her mouth, she even mentioned the punishment. From Yi Qing Luo's standpoint, she should be filled with gratitude, thanking the Linglong Palace Lord for being willing to step forward to settle this matter. Then, he agreed to Linglong Palace Master's punishment. In this way, everything that the second and third judicial authorities had done to her was written off. Both of their positions were saved. This was a good plan. But the Linglong Palace Master had calculated wrongly. She, Yi Qing Luo, wasn't someone who would follow the steps and walk down. If she agreed to it this time, it would only make the Linglong Palace feel that she was easy to talk to, easy to bully. Chapter 41-34. Yi Qing Luo wasn't in the mood to tangle with the people from Linglong Palace. Especially when the Linglong Palace Lord mentioned half a month's time to reflect on her mistakes, it was pure nonsense. Half a month later, she would no longer be in Linglong Palace. Whether the second judicial officer had any repentance or not, wasn't it all up to Linglong Palace Lord? But this was after all the punishment which the Linglong Palace Lord had personally set. If she were to reject it hastily, it would only cause the Linglong Palace Lord to be unhappy with her. In other people's territory, it was better to be more obedient. Therefore, her answer was already very implicit. She gave the Linglong Palace Lord some face and also hinted that even if she agreed to the suggestion which the Linglong Palace Lord suggested, it was because she was unwilling. As expected, after hearing Yi Qing Luo's reply, the Linglong Palace Lord's expression sunk slightly. Her lips curled into a smile as her legs slumped down. Then, based on Miss Ye's opinion, what should we do? Almost every single word was spat out from the Linglong Palace Lord with a tone of gnashing her teeth. Her entire face was almost covered with a patch of black. As long as Miss Yi can forgive our disrespectful actions, I am willing to accept any punishment. The third judicial officer spoke out at the same time. His tone was filled with sincerity and determination. One of them was suppressing his anger. Another was apologizing sincerely. No matter how they looked at it, they felt that Yi Qing Luo really didn't know what was good for her. The surrounding female disciples' hearts were about to jump out of their throats. This was the first time they had seen such an arrogant and daring person in their entire lives. To everyone, the punishment which the Linglong Palace Lord had suggested was already very heavy. This was totally because she cared about Yi Qing Luo, hence she punished the two judicial officers in this way. But not only did Yi Qing Luo not accept the Linglong Palace Lord's good intentions, she even put on a reluctant expression. Could it be that their third judicial officers weren't humble enough? Could it be that Yi Qing Luo wanted all the disciples of Linglong Palace to kneel down in front of her to plead for mercy? Everyone's gaze towards Yi Qing Luo was filled with disgust and displeasure. The surrounding people's emotions. Yi Qing Luo naturally felt it. But, she didn't even have any reaction when the Linglong Palace Lord's expression changed. Not to mention caring about those people's emotions. Yi Qing Luo touched her smooth and exquisite chin as her pink lips slowly curled upwards. He looked at the three judges with a faint smile. This third judicial judge was truly a talent. He knew when to yield and when to stand tall. He completely cooperated with the Linglong Palace Master. His attitude of admitting his mistake was sincere. He took the initiative to invite them to the ancestral hall and even copied Buddhist scriptures. As the person involved, she was almost touched by the sincere apology of the three judicial authorities. Since Linglong Palace's hall master has personally come forward, I naturally follow the host's wishes as a guest. Yi Qing Luo replied with a smile, as her face was filled with an indifferent smile. The Linglong Palace master's face sank. Yi Qing Luo's voice rang once again, but I have another matter which I need to trouble Linglong Palace Lord with. Why would Miss Yi bother the Linglong Palace? The Linglong Palace master smiled coldly. Facing the Linglong Palace master's ridiculing tone, Yi Qing Luo's expression didn't change. I just arrived at the Linglong Palace yesterday and don't know Protector Fan at all. She can't possibly frame me for no reason, and even want my life. If you say there's no one else behind this, I don't believe it. When Yi Qing Luo's words were clearly transmitted into everyone's ears, instantly it set off a raging wave. Like a huge rock, smashing into a calm lake. Chapter 41-35. You're arrogant and domineering, arrogant and egotistical. Framing and framing is because Guardian Fan can't stand you. Second Judicial Judge blamed Yi Qing Luo for his punishment. The moment he said it, it was a sharp ridicule. Yi Qing Luo couldn't help but burst out laughing. Her long and narrow eyes were curved upwards. So, you Linglong Palace Hall can't stand someone, so you want to frame the other party. TSK, I really feel bitterly disappointed for those disciples who were wronged by you. You're spouting nonsense. Second Judicial Judge's face flushed red as he was infuriated, but he couldn't refute Yi Qing Luo at all. Yi Qing Luo blinked innocently. What's the matter, Second Judicial Judge? I'm just following what you said and deduced. Is there anything wrong with that? Second Judicial Judge's chest heaved up and down as he clenched his fists. Yi Qing Luo. You. Shut up. Linglong Palace Lord's sleeves moved. A gust of wind swept towards Second Judicial Judge's face. Second Judicial Judge cried out miserably as he was sent flying by that gust of wind and fell heavily onto the ground. Since Second Judicial Judge refuses to accept my punishment, then, from today onwards, Second Judicial Judge will be stripped of his judicial position. Linglong Palace Lord was obviously angry as his tone was filled with chilliness. Second Judicial Judge spat out blood as his throat was filled with a fishy sweetness, without any energy to speak. Linglong Palace Lord restrained his emotions and looked towards Yiqing Luo as he said word by word, "Miss Ye's request, I will try my best to do it. I will personally investigate this matter. Are you satisfied with this, Miss Yi?" Yiqing Luo's long and narrow eyes rose as she smiled. "Since Palace Lord is so reasonable, I can rest assured. Then I'll have to trouble Palace Lord." Linglong Palace Lord flicked his sleeves as he turned around and left the main hall. Before he left, his cold gaze swept past the two judicial judges who were kneeling on the ground. His expression was as cold as ice. The next moment, he flicked his sleeves again and left without turning back. Second Judicial Judge seemed to have lost all his energy as he staggered and fell onto the ground. A big mouthful of blood flowed down her chin and onto her robe. Her eyes were wide open, unable to recover from the huge change. The third judicial judge glanced at the second judicial judge and slowly stood up from the ground. She cupped her fists towards Yiqing Luo and left the main hall. Everyone present was silent for a while. He was still unable to recover from the shock just now. Did the temple master directly remove the second judicial officer from his position? The current second judicial system was no longer the second judicial system. There was a portion of them who were even more curious towards Yiqing Luo. It was rumored that this young lady named Yiqing Luo was the murderer who killed Linglong Palace's mysterious maiden. This trip to Linglong Palace was to investigate the truth behind Yiqing Luo killing Linglong Palace's profound maiden. Why would the temple master be so fearful of her? Yes, it was fear. In everyone's eyes, the palace master was an extremely cold woman. There was basically nothing that could affect her emotions. But, in front of Yiqing Luo, the palace master had given in repeatedly. He had also agreed to Yiqing Luo's requests several times. What on earth was going on? Because of the Linglong Palace master's attitude, everyone's attitude towards Yiqing Luo had an earth-shattering change. Chapter 41-36. The minute this sentence was said, those female guards who were originally searching Yiqing Luo's body for the poisonous scripture grass, they changed their direction and swarmed towards the second judicial magistrate. They lifted her up and swiftly walked out of the main hall. The second judicial magistrate was first stunned, and when she was lifted up by a few female guards, she immediately started cursing out in embarrassment. But her mouth was directly gagged. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she watched the second judicial magistrate's figure disappear before she slowly retracted her gaze. She ignored the surrounding people, casting various gazes at her. She directly walked back to her own room. Towards the Lord of Linglong Palace's attitude towards her, Yiqing Luo was more or less surprised. She didn't know if it was because she was afraid of her Overlord's woman title, or there was some other motive. But regarding the Lord of Linglong Palace's punishment towards those two judicial magistrates, Yiqing Luo actually didn't put it to heart. Because these two judicial magistrates had at least 20 years of online experience in Linglong Palace, and also had a portion of their own power. The Lord of Linglong Palace would absolutely not break the balance of Linglong Palace because of her. The punishment now was merely a superficial act, putting on a show for her. Perhaps tomorrow, that second judicial magistrate would come knocking on her door and apologize again. Following that, the Lord of Linglong Palace would say something else. This matter would then be left unsettled. Otherwise, the Lord of Linglong Palace wouldn't have said that it was only to let the second judicial magistrate reflect for half a month. If it wasn't for the fact that the second judicial magistrate's actions were a slap on the Lord of Linglong Palace's face, the Lord of Linglong Palace wouldn't be so angry at the end. Yiqing Luo just pushed the door and entered the room. The expression on her face had some subtle changes. She silently turned around and closed the door. Following that, she walked into the inner room with light footsteps. As expected, a slender figure stood in the middle of the inner room. That man was dressed in a black robe, covering his entire body. Hearing footsteps, that man turned around and the black eyes under the black robe stared at Yiqing Luo. "What are you here for again?" Yiqing Luo walked forward, past that man and sat on a chair by the side. That person stared at Yiqing Luo for a long time. His voice was deep. "I want to see you." Yiqing Luo's hand which was holding the teacup shook a little. "Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace, are you too bored because you have nothing better to do?" She simply put down the teacup and looked at that person with a faint smile. "Logically speaking, your Palace of Darkness is not having an easy time now. Are you really that free to come to Linglong Palace so many times?" She paused for a moment, then lifted her elbow and supported her chin. She giggled, "Or should I say, Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace, your mission is in this Linglong Hall, right? Master doesn't know that I'm here." The Palace Master of Gloomy Palace shook her head. "I'm just worried about you." "Ha." Yiqing Luo didn't believe his words. Which one of his actions wasn't inspired by someone else? How could the true mastermind of the Dark Shadow Palace not know his every move? In front of her, he was always affectionate, as if he really loved her till the end of time. "Doesn't your teeth ache?" She felt sour all over. "It doesn't matter if you believe me or not, I know very well what I'm doing." The Palace Master of Gloomy Palace saw the ridicule in Yiqing Luo's eyes. He pursed his lips as his voice sounded a little hoarse. The pitch-black eyes under the black robe also had an extremely faint layer of dimness. This was a little thought-provoking. Yiqing Luo remained silent for a moment, as her pink lips pursed slightly, and an extremely faint smile surfaced. "You said, Linglong Palace will be in danger, and it has nothing to do with Secluded Darkness Palace. Then, you should at least tell me, what danger does this Linglong Palace have?" The Palace Master of Secluded Darkness Palace did not reply immediately. He lowered his head in silence. The black robe on his head covered his entire face. His entire body exuded an aura of conflict and struggle. Yiqing Luo didn't rush him. The two of them remained silent. After a long time, only then did he slowly move. He raised his head and said, "The Palace Master of the Linglong Palace wants to groom you to be the next Palace Master of the Linglong Palace." After he said that, Yiqing Luo was stunned. While the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace was silent. She had imagined countless of possibilities in her mind. But she had never thought that it would be this point. Groom her to become the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace. Chapter 4138. She had just arrived at the Linglong Palace Hall and she had already caused a huge commotion. She will be the Hall Master. Aren't you afraid that the Linglong Palace Hall will collapse? The Palace Master of the Linglong Palace has taken a liking to you, and she has also taken a liking to the person behind you. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace pursed his lips, and his voice was a little hoarse. Otherwise, why do you think she would tolerate you so much? She's just trying to lower your guard against her. He paused for a moment before continuing. Do you know why the Linglong Palace was able to take root in the Earth domain for the past few hundred years? Yiqing Luo shook her head. Don't know. The Linglong Palace is not as miraculous as the people in the land make it out to be. It is also not as the people in the land think. where it represents justice and protects the peace of the land. He lowered his head and said in a low voice, "The existence of the Linglong Palace is nothing more than a place that specializes in finding a body that can match its power. And you have fulfilled the requirements of the Linglong Palace." This sentence sounded extremely familiar. If I remember correctly, back then, Old Lai had also mentioned the Linglong Palace to her. He had always said that the Linglong Palace was not a good place. It sounded familiar, a place to find a body that matched his strength. Those Empyrean fairies were merely puppets created by the Linglong Palace. However, Old Lai did not elaborate on the specifics. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" The palace master of the Netherworld Palace explained, "You are now the successor that the Linglong Palace master has chosen. Your body will become the puppet of the Linglong Palace master." Puppet. It was this word again. What kind of existence was this Linglong Palace? In any case, Yiqing Luo, leave Linglong Palace first. You must not become Linglong Palace's puppet. He didn't continue speaking as he started to persuade her. In Yiqing Luo's heart, she was still pondering over what he said about the puppet and finding a compatible body. She looked up at him and asked, "How do you know about the Linglong Palace?" The palace master of the Netherworld Palace sighed. "I heard it from Master." Master. He was the person behind the scenes of the Dark Palace. He was the real culprit who had been plotting against her from behind. What that person said, Yiqing Luo expressed that she definitely had a motive. When Master mentioned the Linglong Palace, he didn't know that you were there. He only warned me not to provoke the Linglong Palace. Knowing that Yiqing Luo wouldn't believe his master, he explained. You don't know. How could that person not know her whereabouts? Yiqing Luo expressed her disbelief. Moreover, that person did not look like the kind of person who would care about his disciple. It was a strange warning. Were they really afraid that he would provoke the Linglong Palace? Or was he trying to use his mouth to make her go against the Linglong Palace? Yiqing Luo expressed her doubts. I'm telling the truth. Yiqing Luo, I took the risk of being discovered by Master, taking the risk of letting Master know that I already have a disloyal heart, to sneak into the Linglong Palace, just because I care about you. I don't want you to become a puppet of the Linglong Palace. Yiqing Luo's suspicion and silence deeply pierced his heart and his eyes. He staggered a step back. His body swayed a little. He raised one hand and pressed it on his chest. He pulled it up forcefully and raised his head. That pair of dark eyes under the black robe stared at her without blinking. Chapter 41-39. His voice was filled with sourness. As though he was choking with sobs. Somewhat painful. Yiqing Luo's face was still devoid of emotions. She looked at the man in front of her calmly, listening to his bitter and powerless words. He couldn't blame her for being too cold. But the other party was her enemy's man. He was the disciple of the person who had tried to take her life several times and struck out at her and the people around her. Because of the person behind the scenes in secluded palace, her brothers had already suffered too much. She had also almost lost her life several times. If it wasn't for her good luck. If it wasn't for Dmo Xian's protection. She might have let that person get his way long ago. So to let her face this person in front of her, the palace lord of secluded palace on the surface, the disciple of the person behind the scenes. How could she trust her? Even if he was sincere. He was sincere, not wanting her to get hurt and taking such a huge risk to specially tell her all of this. Who could guarantee that this wasn't that person's scheme? It wasn't that she was panicking. But that person's temper was just so despicable. She had to guard against him. You still don't believe me? The young lady's silence broke his last persistence. He burst out laughing. His body staggered backwards several steps. As he laughed, his voice turned hoarse and astringent. If it was any other lady, perhaps she would be feeling heartache and guilt now. Yiqing Luo's gaze didn't change at all as she spoke calmly. You also said that the Linglong Palace's surroundings have already formed an enchantment barrier. Even if I want to leave, there's no way, isn't it? I can bring you away. The palace lord of secluded palace suddenly raised his head as his tone was filled with joy. He took quick steps towards Yiqing Luo as he stretched out his hand in an attempt to hold her arm. Leave with me. I can bring you out. Yiqing Luo tilted her body slightly as she avoided his outstretched hand. The palace lord of secluded palace was stunned as he stared at his empty hand and slowly retracted it. His fingers tightened as his excitement and joy seemed as though it was just an illusion earlier. Yiqing Luo looked at the man whose head was hung low as she gave a low laugh. In her laughter, there were hints of ridicule. Palace lord of secluded darkness. Since you can enter and exit Linglong Hall freely, then Xian can too, isn't that so? The body of the palace master of the Netherworld Palace suddenly stiffened. Yiqing Luo's laughter was still ringing in his ears. Thank you for your concern, I appreciate your intention, but I still want to wait for Xian to pick me up. Everyone knew that she had followed the Grand Judge to the Linglong Palace. If she left with the palace master of secluded darkness palace, who knew? After leaving the Linglong Palace, would the person behind the scenes appear? At that time, Dmo Xian would go to the Linglong Palace to look for her. But she was in danger. The eyes of the palace master of the Netherworld Palace dimmed. His face, which was hidden under the black robe, was pitch black. He clenched his fists. Suddenly, his backhand swiftly grabbed towards Yiqing Luo's wrist. His voice was a little anxious. Every moment you stay in the Linglong Palace is dangerous. I can't see you in danger. You don't know how terrifying the Linglong Palace is and don't know what kind of puppet you will become after you become the palace master of the Linglong Palace. I must bring you away. His actions were fast and accurate, adding on to the fact that it was sudden. Yiqing Luo wasn't able to evade in time. Her wrist was locked tightly in his palm. She frowned in pain as she tried to struggle. Chapter 4140. Bam! The sound of the room door being smashed open was heard. The wooden boards shattered and fell onto the ground. Trying to leave. A lady's stern voice was heard from the door. Immediately following that, Linglong Palace Lord brought along 2 judicial officers as she rushed into the room. And outside the room, there were at least a few hundred female disciples. The current Linglong Palace Lord's expression was gloomy as she stared deadly at the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace. Third Judicial Officer's usual amiable face was now covered with a solemn expression. Her gaze swept past the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace and subsequently fell onto Yiqing Luo. There was an obvious ridicule in her eyes. But very quickly, it was replaced by anger. Is Linglong Palace a place where you can come and go as you please? Outside the room, there were orderly footsteps as the shadows covered the sky and earth. Yiqing Luo looked through the broken door and saw a huge crowd outside the door. Thinking about it, Linglong Palace's disciples had all gathered over here. The palace lord of the Linglong Palace Hall had made up his mind to make her stay. Yiqing Luo's lips curled slightly as her narrow eyes squinted as she withdrew her hand from the palace lord of Secluded Darkness Palace's hand. Linglong Palace Lord and the rest suddenly barged into the room. And they were aggressive. Yiqing Luo withdrew her hand and broke free from his restraints. Yiqing Luo swung her hand and raised her slender brows as she looked at Linglong Palace Lord with a smile which didn't look like a smile. Palace Lord, what do you mean? Yiqing Luo, do you treat all of us as fools? The Grand Judicial Officer's face sunk as he shouted furiously, since you arrived at Linglong Palace yesterday, you've been meeting him privately. Do you really think that we don't know anything? The Grand Judicial Officer pointed at the palace lord of Secluded Darkness Palace. Following that, he sneered, "This person is not the overlord. You're planning to do some shady business with this man in Linglong Palace behind the overlord's back." These words sounded like they were filled with a sense of indignation and indignation. Yiqing Luo guessed that this Grand Judicial Officer might have been hurt in the past. Yiqing Luo glanced sideways at the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace and then looked at Linglong Palace Lord. The eyes of the Linglong Palace Lord were still fixed on the Palace Lord of the Secluded Darkness Palace. She let out a low chuckle that contained the sweetness and laziness of a young girl. "Perhaps you don't know who this person is, but the Palace Master should know who this person is." The topic shifted to the Hall Master. The first judicial judge and the third judicial judge's gaze immediately shifted to the Linglong Palace Master. "I didn't expect that the person who had been following Miss Yi would be you." The Linglong Palace Master did not deny it. Her face was cold, but a cold smile appeared on her face. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace obviously did not expect that the people from the Linglong Palace would discover his existence. Coincidentally, he was stopped in his tracks. His face under the black robe was somewhat gloomy. He speedily stood in front of Yiqing Luo and his tall and slender figure completely hid Yiqing Luo behind him. When he got close to Yiqing Luo, he whispered, "I'm sorry." Then, he turned to look at the Linglong Palace's Hall Master and emitted a sinister cold aura. His actions made the Linglong Palace Master laugh. She raised her hand and covered half of her red lips as she laughed softly. "Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace, if I didn't investigate wrongly, you and Miss Yi should have a hostile relationship. Now, putting on a protective stance and standing in front of Miss Yi, don't tell me you've betrayed the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace." Chapter 41-41. Secluded Palace Lord's body stiffened slightly. It was obvious that the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace knew him and knew his identity, as well as some matters regarding the gloomy palace. But the eyes under the black robe flickered slightly when it met with Linglong Palace Lord's. But he still didn't move away. Like a towering mountain, he blocked Yiqing Luo's way. Secluded Palace Lord. Third Judicial Officer opened his mouth in astonishment as he sized up the man in black robe. In the depths of his eyes, there was a strange glint darting about. Linglong Palace Lord's red lips curled as she said word by word, "On account that you're the Palace Lord of Secluded Palace, if you leave now, I can let you off. But Miss Yi, you absolutely cannot leave Linglong Palace Lord." Secluded Palace Lord's voice was gloomy and cold as black chi revolved around him. "If we leave, we can only leave together." Ha ha ha. "Palace Lord of Secluded Palace, have you forgotten that the lady you're protecting behind already has the overlord? You're risking your life for her. Will she be touched because of this?" Linglong Palace Lord's eyes were slightly cold as his vision slowly shifted onto Yiqing Luo. Secluded Palace Lord's body tensed up as he glanced sideways at the young lady behind him. He stretched out his hand towards her. "I'll bring you away." The hand under the black robe was long and slender with a thick callus on it. When it stretched out towards Yiqing Luo, it was slightly trembling. Yiqing Luo slowly raised her hand. His head immediately lifted up, apparently because Yiqing Luo took the initiative to stretch out her hand. He became excited. If his head wasn't covered by the black robe, she would probably be able to see his pair of glowing eyes. But Yiqing Luo didn't place her hand on his hand, but it moved upwards. She put her hand on his arm. Gently, she pushed it aside. The young lady's lips curled into a faint smile. Her long and narrow eyes were curved as a hint of ridicule was outlined in her eyes. "No need, we can't leave." She laughed lightly as there wasn't much worry in her tone. The palace master of the Netherworld Palace looked at his hand that was pushed away and stared at it blankly. As long as you are willing, even if it takes my life, I will send you out safely. You still don't understand. Yiqing Luo's gaze went past him, meeting Ling Long Palace Lord's gaze. When their eyes met, the energy between the two of them skyrocketed. The girl's red clothes fluttered, and her eyes were full of flirtatious and domineering aura. Even if he was not as old as the Ling Long Palace Lord. In terms of imposing manner, she did not lose out to the Ling Long Palace Master. What do you mean? The Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace didn't understand what Yiqing Luo meant. Yiqing Luo lazily raised her lower lip as her expression was extremely sloppy. Her gaze swept over the Ling Long Palace Master and the two judicial officials, and she chuckled. From the very beginning, the Ling Long Palace Master knew of your existence. If I'm not mistaken, the Palace Master must have mistaken you for Xian from the very beginning. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as she looked at Ling Long Palace Lord in a languid and teasing manner, am I right? Ling Long Palace Lord didn't say a word. Yiqing Luo continued, since yesterday, when Wu Fu, and Hall Master Wu Yen failed to find trouble and instead suffered a loss, you were already unhappy with me. But because you thought that the person hiding in the dark was the Overlord, so on the surface, you didn't dare to go against me, and even followed my suggestions time and time again, right? Chapter 41-42. Yesterday, the timing when she sensed the presence of the Ling Long Palace Lord was a little too coincidental. According to the Ling Long Palace Lord's words, she said that she had been there ever since Wu Fu'er found trouble. Before Wu Fu'er found trouble, the Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace had appeared in her room. So, there was a possibility that the Ling Long Palace Lord knew that there was a second person in her room. So she hid in the dark, wanting to know if the person in the dark was Dmo Xian. But unexpectedly, before the person in the dark appeared. However, when Wu Fu'er came looking for trouble for no reason, she beat him up and almost lost her life. As the Ling Long Palace Lord, she had no choice but to show herself. After that, she arranged for her to stay in the room next to the judicial courtyard. Wasn't it to confirm who the person hiding in the dark was? So what if you know? The Ling Long Palace Lord didn't refute, but smiled faintly, since you've confirmed that the Overlord is not by your side, and everything has been seen through by you, then there's no need to continue this show. Finally going to reveal your true face. Yiqing Luo wasn't shocked or flustered at all, only smiling at the Ling Long Palace Lord. Looks like you already know the reason why I left you in the Ling Long Palace. The Ling Long Palace Lord sneered. Yiqing Luo touched her chin, I'm very curious, why me? Because, your body, is just suitable. A trace of madness flashed past the Ling Long Palace Lord's eyes, as long as you take over this Palace Lord's position. This Palace Lord will be free. When she said the last two words, the Ling Long Palace Lord's face was twisted. That was a kind of craziness that she had been chasing for a long time. Yiqing Luo raised her brows. Body just suitable. It was indeed as what old Lai and the Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace said. The Ling Long Palace Lord's target was a compatible body. The Ling Long Palace Lord's motive was really to make her the next Ling Long Palace Lord. Moreover, it seemed that becoming the Ling Long Palace Lord wasn't as glamorous as it seemed on the surface. Freedom. The Ling Long Palace Lord's freedom was restricted. Yiqing Luo, the surrounding area is filled with our Ling Long Palace Lord's men. As long as the Overlord didn't rush over yesterday, he has no way to enter Ling Long Palace Lord to save you. The smile on the face of the Ling Long Palace Master's face deepened. Her tone was sinister as she said, accept reality obediently. If you struggle and get hurt, you'll be the one suffering, the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace sneered, you can try. You can't touch her at all. The Linglong Palace Master gave him a stern look and warned, remember your status. You and her are on opposing sides. This has nothing to do with you. The Palace Master of Gloomy Palace said coldly, if you want to touch her, ask me first. The Palace Master of the Linglong Palace did not back down. Her expression became solemn and dignified. She narrowed her eyes and said, the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace has decided to become enemies with the Linglong Palace. He raised his head up high as his slender figure stood in front of Yi Qing Luo, not moving at all. He used his actions to express his meaning. His expression turned cold as he waved his arm. Since the Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace wants to show off in front of the beauty, then this Palace Lord shall fulfill your hero's wish to save the beauty. Outside the door, 10 over-aggressive female disciples rushed in. Linglong Palace Lord's disciples who were dressed in lotus green robes filled their eyes. Chapter 41-43. Linglong Palace Lord's words had just landed. Those 10 over female disciples' aura exploded. Endless profound steps, like a surging wave, covered the surrounding area of 100 miles. Palace Lord's pupils constricted as he grabbed Yi Qing Luo's wrist and said worriedly, be careful. Just as he stood in front of Yi Qing Luo and stretched out his hand, the surrounding dark force exploded with a loud bang. The entire house, under the collision of the profound energy, collapsed onto her with a boom. The surrounding green grass and thick trees were all uprooted. In a split second, the earth shook. Everyone was stunned by this extremely destructive scene. Even the person involved, Palace Lord's ears were buzzing as he went into a daze. He stretched out his hand to grab Yi Qing Luo but grabbed nothing. Boundless profound energy fell straight down from his back. He was wholeheartedly protecting Yi Qing Luo but strangely grabbed the young lady's hand as his eyes frantically searched for the young lady's figure. He had no time to react to this profound energy. It was at this moment. A burst of valiant and overbearing energy blocked his back. It collided fiercely with that oncoming profound energy. Following that, it was the current situation. Palace Lord of Seclusion Palace suddenly turned his head back. As expected, he saw that fiery figure, under that sky full of profound energy, had an elegant posture, faintly discernible. That slender figure just stood in front of him. He wanted to protect her, but instead made her protect him. Palace Lord of Seclusion Palace rejoiced that he was covered in a layer of black robe and no one could see his expression under the black robe. A lady like Yi Qing Luo. Why would she need his protection? Wasn't this the reason why he liked Yi Qing Luo? The overbearing collision caused everything present to turn into a piece of ruins. Amidst the rising smoke and layers upon layers of ripples from the profound waves, everyone only saw a calm expression, with a hint of laziness in between her brows, quietly standing there. As though earlier, that super strong destructive force wasn't caused by her. Trash. Linglong Palace Lord's expression sunk when he saw this, as his gaze swept towards the 2 judicial officers beside him. The first judicial magistrate and third judicial magistrate looked at each other and leaped towards Yi Qing Luo. The female disciples of the Linglong Palace also followed closely behind and attacked. Yi Qing Luo's gaze didn't change at all as she glanced sideways at the man behind her. Don't bother about me. If you can leave, then leave first. How could I leave you behind and go alone? The Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace regained his senses from the earlier shock as he speedily shifted to Yi Qing Luo's side. I still stand by what I said. If you want to leave, let's leave together. Their target is not you. As Yi Qing Luo was saying that, she flipped her hand to receive the incoming attack. The glower flame fan in her hand opened up as boundless profound energy turned into several wind blades, covering the sky and covering the earth as it surged forward. She continued, since the Linglong Palace Lord wants me to inherit the position of the next Palace Lord, he will not really do anything to me. I won't leave. The palace master of the Netherworld Palace gritted his teeth and spat out. He then charged into the crowd in front of him. The profound light exploded and countless profound energies collided with each other. In the entire space, waves after waves of perilous waves were set off. The moment the first judicial magistrate and third judicial magistrate made their move, their target was Yiqing Luo. The two of them seemed to have moved at the same time and appeared behind Yiqing Luo. Boundless profound energy surged in the palms of the two men. Even Yiqing Luo's surrounding aura started to fluctuate. After the two of them exchanged glances, they suddenly struck a palm towards Yiqing Luo. Chapter 41-44. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A deafening explosion sound reverberated through the entire space. In the space, profound waves surged like a monstrous huge wave, wave after wave, crazily attacking. Even the sky had turned into an extremely oppressive deep black. The aura crazily intertwined, swallowing Yiqing Luo entirely. Yiqing Luo. This scene made the palace lord's pupils abruptly widen, as he screamed out Yiqing Luo's name hoarsely. He wanted to dash towards the side where the profound energy was surging. But his path was completely blocked by the Linglong Palace's disciples. Get lost! Get lost! The palace lord of the Linglong Palace bellowed furiously. The overbearing energy crazily sent the people who were blocking his way flying. But there were still numerous female disciples who surged forward one after another. Under the black robe, that pair of gloomy and sullen eyes overflowed with large black threads. If he wasn't shrouded in the black robe, then everyone could see. That pair of eyes was like a densely packed spider web, with numerous black threads. Those black threads, bit by bit, lingered in his pupils. Endless evil qi overflowed from the palace lord of the Linglong Palace. Pieces after pieces of mist-like evil qi spread out in all directions. Everywhere it went. Those Linglong Palace's female disciples who were flocking towards him all had a huge change in expression. Immediately following that, the expressions on their faces started to turn sinister. One by one, they started to tear each other apart, tangling together. She realized that something was wrong with the evil qi which was spreading out. Linglong Palace Lord's expression changed slightly, as she speedily retreated a few steps. She waved her sleeve. A transparent barrier blocked in front of her. It blocked off all the evil energy that was spreading over. But she had avoided the evil qi. But those female disciples who were guarding the surroundings were all affected by the evil qi. Their method of killing each other was extremely vicious. Just a moment later, the entire space was filled with a thick blood stench. Blood also dyed the ground red. This scene made Linglong Palace Lord's expression sunk. She raised her voice and shouted, "Wake up! What do you all look like?" It was so easy for him to be attracted by my mind. However, no one heard her voice. Without these obstacles in the way, he would not be able to stop them. The palace lord of Ethereal Palace immediately rushed towards Yiqing Luo's direction. In the meantime, earlier that wave of boundless energy which had engulfed Yiqing Luo suddenly exploded with an extremely dense and intense aura. Bang! There was a loud noise. A fiery red shadow flashed past in front of his eyes. It was really fiery red. It was like a flame, dazzling and dazzling. That red was blinding for an instant. The surrounding air seemed to become extremely hot as a result. The surging heat and the blazing heat roasted everything around it. The ground was littered with corpses, and the smell of dried meat emanated from them. Many female disciples were affected by the eviline energy. Like a wild beast, he opened his mouth and began to tear at his opponent's flesh. It was an extremely bloody and cruel scene. The first judicial judge and the third judicial judge's relaxed faces immediately tensed up. He immediately raised his head and looked in the direction of the fiery red shadow. His entire body instantly froze. That is, it was a giant bird that was entirely red in color. Its phoenix feathers were like flames, overflowing with brilliant colors. Between the spread of its wings, there was an extremely dazzling glow. Vermilion bird. Chapter 41-45. And what made the first and third judicial systems shocked was, on the back of the vermilion bird, there was a slender figure. In the raging flames, the light and shadow were floating, and it was very obvious. The red dress was like fire, overflowing with beauty. Totally not suppressed by the majesty of the vermilion bird just because it was the same color as the vermilion bird. The first and third judicial system's pupils contracted as they revealed a look of disbelief. The person on the vermilion bird's back. It was Yiqing Luo. They didn't know much about Yiqing Luo's investigation. Moreover, those bunch of rich wastrels around Mu Qiulan had mentioned it. They only thought that Yiqing Luo had relied on the overlord to get her current reputation. Although the great judicial judge had investigated the details of what had happened at the auction, he was not able to do so. The citizens praised Yiqing Luo so much that she was about to ascend to the heavens. Although she believed the citizens' words that Xiao Yulu wasn't killed by Yiqing Luo. As for those exaggerated words that Yiqing Luo alone dealt with most of the elites in the Earth domain. They treated it as everyone's compliments to the overlord and deliberately spread it out. But they had never heard of it. Yiqing Luo had subdued an ancient sacred beast as her own battle pet. This was an ancient sacred beast. One of the legendary 4 sacred beasts. It wasn't something that the overlord could capture personally and give to Yiqing Luo to form a contract successfully. Under the shocked gazes of the 2 judicial officers, the young lady leaped up, falling from the sky. A sharp gust of wind swept the horrifying profound energy. Her fingertips moved slightly as the glower flame fan opened up. A bright red glow encircled the glower flame fan. It was like a dazzling sharp blade, shining with a cold glint. The 2 judicial officers' eyes widened as their bodies instinctively flipped over and swiftly rolled down the ground. Bam! The profound glow fell down. It blasted the ground open. Gravel kept flying. The 2 judges narrowly dodged the fatal blow just now. However, when he rolled on the ground, he was stained with blood and flesh that flew everywhere. When they climbed back up, the 2 of them were in a sorry state. You! How dare you! The senior judicial magistrate didn't expect that his and the third judicial magistrate's sneak attack had failed, and instead, they were teased by Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo smiled as she looked at the both of them. Her brows were filled with ridicule. Great magistrate's words are just too ridiculous. You sneak attacked me and I haven't even said that you're despicable. You were just scared by my Qi Yan, and you became like this, and you still blame me. Yiqing Luo. The Grand Inquisitor's eyes darkened. She clenched her fists and glared at him. I don't want to cross swords with you. I was the one who brought you to Linglong Palace yesterday, and I've spent the most time with you. A cold light flashed across her eyes. I don't want to hurt you. Yiqing Luo rolled her eyes, and with a flick of her fingertips, the glower flame fan flipped in a few fancy ways in her palm. A coquettish red glow burst forth. Like layers upon layers of ripples, they spread out in all directions. Their speed was extremely slow. The great judicial officer was about to ridicule Yiqing Luo's action. That surging profound energy was closing in on him. It was just a moment's effort. The profound glow was suddenly like a tide, madly slapping the ground. The sudden majestic force suddenly fell on the abdomen of the Grand Inquisitor. The Grand Inquisitor only had time to scream. The whole person flew out. Dong! She fell heavily among the corpses. Thick blood stained her nostrils. Chapter 41-46. What a joke. There wasn't the slightest bit of affection. He still dared to play the emotional card in front of her. Just now, the new female disciple was poisoned. The First Judicial Division was on her side, preventing the Second Judicial Division and the Third Judicial Division from interfering. However, this was not because of the Grand Magistrate's good intentions towards her. It was just to compete with the Second Judicial Division. And you want to use it as a bargaining chip? Ha, what a joke. The Grand Judge opened his mouth, wanting to refute. However, large mouthfuls of blood gushed out from his mouth. The Grand Judge clutched his chest in pain, his entire body trembling and curling up. Yi Qing Luo. The Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace looked at the vermilion bird in the sky and took a look at Yi Qing Luo. It was until the flames around Yi Qing Luo had subsided before he hurried over to her. He had also retracted the sinister aura emanating from his body. However, the surrounding female disciples didn't stop killing each other with ferocious expressions. Yi Qing Luo kept her glower flame fan as she raised her eyes towards the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace and was just about to open her mouth. However, his eyes suddenly widened. She quickly reached out and grabbed the Palace Master of Secluded Darkness Palace. With a jerk of her elbow, Lin Mingya swiftly pulled Lin Mingya behind him. Then, her other hand formed a palm chi and slapped towards the back of the Palace Master of Gloomy Palace. Like a tidal wave, the profound light surged out with great momentum. Bang, 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 a few profound waves collided, and the sound of explosions was deafening. The entire space seemed to be distorted. The profound waves were filled with layers and layers of ripples that couldn't be smoothed out. This palm had indeed blocked a large amount of dark force in front of him. But, ugh, surging profound energy, the remnant might vibrated as a strong tail wind slapped onto Yi Qing Luo's chest. She felt a fishy taste in her throat and took a few steps back. Behind him was the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace. If she retreated like that, she would definitely fall into the arms of the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace. Yi Qing Luo's eyes flashed slightly and with a turn of her feet, she changed her direction. He was already under pressure from the aftershock. His body moved so much. His legs went soft and he fell to the ground. A few streaks of blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. The arms of the Palace of Darkness Lord Zhang froze in midair. The eyes under the black robe gazed deeply at Yi Qing Luo. Obviously. Yi Qing Luo could totally retreat into his arms. Why did he have to forcefully change his direction? Aggravate my internal injuries. It was just a simple touch. She couldn't even stand it. He looked at the pale-faced girl who was half collapsed on the ground. Little by little, he retracted his arms that were suspended in midair. As for the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace's changes in expression and actions, the Palace Master of the Secluded Darkness Palace was stunned. Yi Qing Luo didn't have the time to bother about it, nor did she have the time to care about it. After she steadied herself, she immediately raised her eyes and looked in the direction of the powerful attack. Linglong Palace Lord's expression was icy cold as a pair of gloomy beautiful eyes, like a poisonous snake, wrapped around Yi Qing Luo's body. The person who attacked just now was the Palace Master of Linglong Palace. Seeing that the first and second judicial judges couldn't do anything to her, was he going to take action personally? Yi Qing Luo's eyes narrowed as her lips curled into a bloodthirsty arc. Before he could speak, suddenly she heard a sharp voice coming from afar. Yi Qing Luo, you didn't expect this, right? You slut, still being complacent. Did you really think that our Palace Master would take action against me? Following that voice, she saw 4 female disciples carrying a carriage nearing quickly. Chapter 41-47. The entire Ling Long Palace Hall was in such a huge commotion. The second judicator naturally felt it. In addition, the maidservant sent by the three judicial authorities came to her and told her some simple things in a concise and comprehensive manner. For example, the reason why Ling Long Palace Lord gave in to Yi Qing Luo was because he suspected that the Overlord was hiding something. For example, Ling Long Palace Lord's concession towards Yi Qing Luo was because Ling Long Palace Lord wanted Yi Qing Luo to become the next Palace Lord. For example, everything that the Ling Long Palace Lord had done and said earlier was actually not counted. It was merely a show that was put up in front of Yi Qing Luo. Hearing this news, the second preceptor's indignant heart finally calmed down. She was also the second in command of the Ling Long Palace. Furthermore, it was the high and mighty second judge. However, the second judicial officer couldn't understand. In this Ling Long Hall, there were plenty of people who were much more outstanding than Yi Qing Luo. Why did they let Yi Qing Lu be the next Ling Long Palace Lord? Obviously, she was more suitable for the position of Ling Long Palace Lord, wasn't she? At this time, the surging dark force aura from the battle outside became even more intense. Once again, he heard those female disciples, who were constantly rushing towards the direction where the profound energy was surging, talking as they ran. The second judicial judge roughly understood. The person hiding behind the scenes was not the Overlord, but the gigolo that Yi Qing Luo had secretly raised. After knowing that it wasn't Di Zun, Ling Long Palace Lord had made a move on Yi Qing Luo. It was a mighty group of people. The dark force soared to the sky and shook the entire Ling Long Palace. The second judicial judge was excited. She didn't feel that a young lady like Yi Qing Luo, along with a gigolo, would be able to deal with so many people from Ling Long Palace. Furthermore, the temple master was also present. What kind of waves could a little girl stir up? The second preceptor immediately called the maidservant beside her and carried her to the direction of the battle. As soon as he arrived, from afar, they saw Yi Qing Luo being thrown onto the ground by the hall master. Yi Qing Luo was in a sorry state as she vomited blood. Not long ago, the humiliation he had suffered from Yi Qing Luo, at this moment, had obtained a carefree release. Second, the sudden appearance of justice. Everyone's gaze shifted to the second judicial judge. The Ling Long Palace Lord also frowned slightly. Looking at the second preceptor's ferocious and proud smile, he didn't say anything in the end to stop him. Second judicial officer stared at Yi Qing Luo venomously as he laughed complacently. Aren't you very arrogant? Continue to stand up and be arrogant. Why are you lying on the ground? She spat fiercely and sneered, you're just a vixen who uses your status as the Overlord to show off. Do you really think you're someone important? If not for Yi Qing Luo, she would not lose face in front of the disciples of the Ling Long Palace. If not for Yi Qing Luo, how could the Ling Long Palace Lord be so ruthless towards her? Yi Qing Luo. The Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace slowly walked to Yi Qing Luo's side as he half squatted down, trying to support her. But it was avoided by Yi Qing Luo. She raised her hand and blocked the hand of the Palace Master of Gloomy Palace. She shook her head at him. I'm fine. I've been rejected again. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace sneered in a low voice, we are just ordinary friends helping each other. Are you going to reject me? I'm really fine. Yi Qing Luo took a deep breath and lifted her slender fingers to wipe the blood off the corners of her lips, as she tried to stand up. But this movement, her chest which was injured earlier started to emit an oppressive pain. Her legs turned soft as she staggered and fell onto the ground. Chapter 41-48. Yi Qing Luo pursed her pale lips and was about to reply. Second elder saw Yi Qing Luo's weak side and laughed heartily. Yi Qing Luo, this elder advises you to be obedient. It's your fortune that the hall master has taken a liking to you. Don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. The third judicial judge looked at the expression of the Ling Long Palace Lord. Seeing her cold expression, he did not stop the second judicial judge from showing off here. He already had a plan in his mind. It looked like Ling Long Palace Lord really wanted Yi Qingqing to be the next successor to the Palace Lord. It wasn't just the second judicial officer who couldn't understand. Even she really couldn't understand why they had chosen Yi Qingluo. If the Ling Long Palace was handed over to Yi Qingluo, can this Ling Long Palace Hall really survive? However, no matter how many questions he had in his heart, she couldn't bring herself to ask the hall master either. No matter what the reason behind it was impossible. As long as this was the Ling Long Palace master's goal. That was the goal of all of them. At least for now. He still had to obey the Palace Lord of Ling Long Palace. In just a short moment, the tripartite judicator's thoughts had already turned 1,000 times. His eyes moved slightly. She smiled and put on an expression of a peacemaker. Miss Yi, although the second judicial judge's words are not pleasant to hear, she is not wrong. The hall master has taken a liking to you and wants to groom you to be the next hall master. This means that he appreciates your abilities and you as a person. If you become the next palace master, the entire Ling Long Palace will be yours. I'm sure you're aware of the Ling Long Palace's position in Jianghu. If you become the Ling Long Palace Lord, it will absolutely be 100 benefits and no harm to you. The third judicial judge's words invisibly stirred up the second judicial judge's nerves. Originally towards the fact that Ling Long Palace Lord had taken a liking to Yi Qingluo to become the next Palace Lord, he was already filled with puzzlement and displeasure. Now, he was stimulated by the words the entire Ling Long Hall is yours. Although the second preceptor was a little angry, but he was not a fool either. She targeted Yi Qingluo in such a manner. If Yi Qingluo really became the Ling Long Palace Lord, she was definitely the first one to be punished as a warning to others. Second judicial officer's eyes flashed past a vicious glint as he looked at Yi Qingluo with jealousy and hatred. She clenched her fists tightly and cupped her hands towards the Ling Long Palace Master. Lord Palace Master, this subordinate feels that she does not have the qualifications to become the Ling Long Palace Master. Not waiting for Ling Long Palace Lord to reply, she continued, the reason why Yi Qingluo came to Ling Long Palace is because she killed Shadowless City's mysterious maiden Mu Qiulan. On top of that, without embroiling city's goddess Qiao Yulu had died at the hands of the Palace of Gloomy Darkness because of her. Now, in less than a day since she arrived at the Ling Long Palace, she has already torn the Ling Long Palace apart. He provoked enemies everywhere and indirectly caused the death of our new female disciple who just entered the Ling Long Palace. At this point, the tone of the second judicial officer became obviously indignant. Lord Palace Master, she carries the blood feud of too many Ling Long Palace disciples. The Palace Lord of Ling Long Palace slowly shifted her cold and gloomy gaze onto her because of the second Lord's words. The coldness that shot out from his eyes. It was like frost, causing one to tremble with fear. The second preceptor felt a chill down his spine when he saw that gaze and shivered. Chapter 41-49. If it wasn't for the Overlord, she's nothing. I can't accept a waste becoming the Palace Lord of Ling Long Palace. After second judicial officer said this, she didn't forget to flatter Ling Long Palace Lord, the only Palace Lord that I can accept, is only you alone. But Ling Long Palace Lord apparently wasn't moved by second judicial officer's flattery. On the contrary, a vicious glint flashed past her eyes. It was fleeting. Second judicial officer didn't notice it at all. She continued to speak with righteous indignation, I still have the same words. A life for a life, it's only right and proper. Even if the Overlord was here, Yi Qingluo would have to take responsibility for the few lives she had taken. Following that, second judicial officer raised her chin up high, putting on a look of righteousness, as though she was wholeheartedly thinking for Linglong Palace. Third judicial officer immediately went up and pulled second judicial officer back, persuading, Palace Lord naturally has her reasons for making this decision, we just have to do as she says. You're not feeling well now, so don't stay here. If we were to fight, it'd be bad if you're injured. She called out to the female attendants, as she lifted second judicial officer's carriage. On the other side, she looked at the surroundings, at those guards who had just rushed over and weren't affected by the Palace Lord's sinister chi, as she shouted in a low voice, still not going over, take the opportunity to restrain Yiqing Luo. After she shouted this, she pretended to exhort, if she cooperates, don't harm her life. Third judicial officer's words were comprehensive, but it was like a needle, piercing into second judicial officer's heart. This was telling her. Because Linglong Palace Lord was their Palace Lord, so no matter who the Palace Lord wanted to appoint as the next Palace Lord, they could only listen. Their opinions were all useless. Her body wasn't feeling well. Wasn't it because Linglong Palace Lord took the initiative to injure her? Obviously, Palace Lord didn't trust Yiqing Luo, but in order to put on a show in front of her, she injured her. Wasn't she innocent? Autocratic, overbearing and inhumane Palace Lord. A seed was planted in second judicial officer's heart, as it sprouted. And on the other side, under the orders of the three judiciaries, the female guards looked at the pale-faced girl who was so weak that she needed the support of the palace master of the Netherworld Palace. Then, he looked at the palace master of Dark Palace with fear. Corpses were strewn all over the ground. It was a cruel and bloody scene. They all knew that it was the evil art of the black-robed man. They were also worried that they would be affected by that man, and that they would kill each other with their sisters. What are you waiting for? Do you want me to do it myself? Looking at the hundreds of people cowering in fear, Zhang Xian felt a chill run down his spine. The Linglong Palace master shouted angrily. His face was full of majesty and his aura was suffocating. The moment the Palace Lord of the Linglong Palace spoke, all the female guards felt a chill run down their spines, and their bodies trembled. The group of them immediately charged towards Yiqing Luo like wolves and tigers. Yiqing Luo, hold on tightly to me, I'll bring you out. The Palace Lord of Abyss Palace's 5 fingers clasped tightly onto Yiqing Luo's arm, trying to pull her into his embrace. However, his fingers had just exerted force. Suddenly, an invisible wave of air hit his finger. His 5 fingers instantly felt a numbing pain. He shook for a moment, as his 5 fingers released Yiqing Luo's wrist. His palm was empty. The person in front of him turned into an afterimage, as it flashed past his eyes. The Palace Lord of Abyss Palace's face under the black robe had a huge change, as he tried to snatch her back. Chapter 4150. A man dressed in a purple robe descended from the sky. His figure was tall and slender, beautiful and upright. His arms stretched out. In his arms, there was an additional slender red figure. Immediately after, the man emptied one of his hands. His slender fingers were beautiful as he gently waved his sleeves. His sleeves rolled like flowing clouds. A misty profound glow rippled in all directions, under everyone's naked eyes. When the profound glow rippled, the speed was obviously extremely slow. But, it was just a moment's time. Everyone only felt a burst of domineering and oppressive aura instantly exploded. In an instant, all the surrounding female guards who had swarmed over, along with the corpses on the ground, were swept away. The sky was filled with flying stones and blood splashed everywhere. The strong aura didn't stop because of this. Everyone only felt a dull pain in their chest. Their internal organs started to rupture and explode. Bam! Linglong Palace Lord's body, which was standing in the midst of flying sand, was suddenly flipped over as she crashed heavily onto a huge rock which had collapsed not too far away. Her body and mind were in immense pain, which made Linglong Palace Lord's eyes widen. What kind of energy was this? It actually broke through her barrier. Linglong Palace Lord couldn't imagine how she witnessed her own barrier shattering bit by bit in front of her eyes. Ever since she became Linglong Palace Lord, she had never suffered this kind of humiliation. Overlord. It's Overlord. A few exclamations were like thunder as it fell into Linglong Palace Lord's ears. No. Impossible. How could it be Dmo Xian? She had obviously set up an inescapable net near Linglong Palace Lord. Set up numerous arrays. Even if it was Dmo Xian, he would absolutely not be able to barge into Linglong Palace Lord. Linglong Palace Lord forcefully propped up her body as she staggered to stand up and looked towards the direction where the energy came from. Profound waves rippled as the energy pervaded. Yiqing Luo was in the arms of a purple-robed man. That peerless face revealed a kind of soul-stirring charm which no one dared to profane. As he lowered his eyes to carefully size up the young lady in his arms, that pair of shimmering peach blossom eyes blossomed with endless coldness and treachery. A strong aura lingered around him. The moment the Linglong Palace Master's line of sight shifted over, the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace Hall looked over. The man suddenly raised his head and a pair of icy cold eyes shot straight at the Linglong Palace Master. Like a sharp blade, it ruthlessly pierced into the heart of the Linglong Palace Master. The Linglong Palace Lord's pupils suddenly shrank and he looked away in fear. Following that, his body became extremely stiff. It's him, it really was Dmo Xian. The face of the Linglong Palace Master twisted a little, she knew it very well. Dmo Xian's appearance would disrupt all her plans. Although he had never crossed hands with Dmo Xian. However, he just stared at her. The Palace Master of the Linglong Palace knew. This rumored mysterious and powerful overlord, he definitely lived up to his reputation. When everyone saw Dmo Xian's appearance, his heart was filled with fear. He felt that death was shrouding his body and mind. However, there was one person who was overjoyed. Ah Xian. The girl's clear and sweet voice was filled with joy. She wrapped her arms around the man's neck and smiled sweetly. The young lady's voice made the man's chilly aura restrain a little. He lowered his head slightly and his shimmering eyes were tainted with a thin layer of evilness. His eyes were as black as a lake, so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. Yiqing Luo knew that he was angry because of the injury on her body. Chapter 41-51. Over and over again, she softly called out his name. The man finally sighed helplessly. His eyes were filled with pampering. He raised his hand and his palm covered her head. It's no use acting coquettishly. You didn't protect yourself properly, so you deserve to be punished. Yiqing Luo grabbed his hand and placed her palms by her lips. She then raised her head and blinked innocently at him. It's my fault, I admit my mistake, I accept my punishment. Verbally, although she admitted her mistake and accepted her punishment. But that expression and that tone. Dmo Xian totally didn't hear the meaning of admitting his mistake. But, when he met with the young lady's eyes, seeing that she was injured, the irrepressible irritation in his heart gradually subsided. He lifted her chin and his index finger lightly touched her lips as his voice was extremely cold. On the account that you're clean and honest, I'll forgive you. Clean and honest. Yiqing Luo blinked as she had a dazed look. Very quickly she reacted and turned her head to look at the palace lord of secluded palace. Dmo Xian couldn't be talking about him, right? The palace lord of secluded palace who was called out had originally seen Yiqing Luo's flowery smile towards Dmo Xian and his heart was stabbed. Suddenly he heard Dmo Xian's ridiculing and boasting words. His throat couldn't help but had a fishy sweet feeling. He was so angry that he wanted to throw up blood. His heart was filled with bitterness and helplessness. Towards him, Yiqing Luo always had a cold and distant attitude. Even if he touched her, she would avoid it. But the moment he saw Dmo Xian, he saw with his own eyes that the young lady's face bloomed with joy from the bottom of her heart. The way she looked at Dmo Xian and her body movements, it revealed her love and trust towards Dmo Xian. The more he looked, the more he felt that this scene was extremely glaring. But he had no right to pull the both of them apart. He also didn't have the right to be like Dmo Xian, snatching Yiqing Luo from his hands without any explanation. When the gazes of the two men shifted onto him, he was stunned. He subconsciously turned his head away, unwilling to look at the loving couple. Yiqing Luo didn't think so much, and after she heard Dmo Xian's words, she raised her fist and pounded on Dmo Xian's chest. When did you arrive at Linglong Palace? Did they arrive a long time ago? What happened just now? Did you see it clearly? She was referring to the scene where the palace master of the Linglong Palace led his disciples to besiege her. Dmo Xian shook his head and nodded. Then, he held her little hand with his broad hand. If I had entered the Linglong Palace, you wouldn't have been injured. There was a tinge of guilt in his voice. His slender fingers lightly touched the netherworld phoenix ring on her fingertip. The connection between the netherworld phoenix ring and the netherworld dragon ring can transmit everything you've experienced to me. Yiqing Luo's eyes widened as she couldn't help but secretly rejoice that she was an upright person and was extremely clean. Dmo Xian saw through Yiqing Luo's inner thoughts with one look. He rubbed her head affectionately. When he raised his eyes again, the gentleness and pampering on his face had already faded away. His gaze looked towards the Linglong Palace master who was standing not too far away, attempting to escape. The corners of his lips curled upwards into a bloodthirsty cold arc, bam. He didn't move. But in the air, it was like a sudden clap of thunder as it exploded. The Linglong Palace master had yet to react. Her body was violently blasted away. He could only hear the rumbling of a violent explosion. Following that, her body fell heavily onto the ground once again. Chapter 4152. Mouthfuls of blood spurted out from Linglong Palace Lord's mouth. The ground also started to shake violently. Inch by inch, it started to crack. The palace lord of the Linglong Palace seemed to be fleeing in a panic. He dragged his wretched and low-laughing body as he swayed and rolled on the ground to avoid the crack that had opened up under his body. She used all her strength to prop herself up and climbed up. Every move she made her limbs and bones emitted intense pain. What kind of power was this? She obviously hadn't seen Dmo Xian make a move. Linglong Palace Lord's miserable state fell into the eyes of the Linglong Palace Lord's disciples and made them tremble in fear. In their eyes, Linglong Palace Lord was the most powerful person in the world. But the moment the Overlord appeared, he easily suppressed Linglong Palace Lord to the point that she couldn't turn the tables. If the Overlord made a move on them, would they be able to survive? Fear and dread eroded the hearts of the Linglong Palace Lord's disciples. She's just deliberately mystifying things. Second Judicial Judge's face turned pale. That profound wave earlier made his mouth overflow with blood. But his mouth refused to admit defeat. Her eyes stared deadly at Dmo Xian, and then stared deadly at Yiqing Luo, as her eyes were filled with venom. Overlord. Do you know that the woman whom you've been pining for, pampering, is behind your back, keeping that gigolo by her side? As she said that, she laughed maniacally, this kind of fickle woman, and you're still so protective of her. These 2 days, the both of them are carrying you, sticking together at all times. Even at night, the both of them are in the same room. Do you know why she got hurt? She got hurt because of that pretty boy. Second Judicial Judge's sudden burst of maniacal laughter and the words he said made the surroundings turn silent. Third Judicial Judge was stunned. He immediately stretched out his hand to pull Second Judicial Judge, attempting to stop Second Judicial Judge from self-destructing. But Second Judicial Judge shook off Third Judicial Judge's hand, his eyes filled with ridicule. Overlord, are you really going to destroy the entire Linglong Palace for such a vixen? I feel indignant for you. Oh. Really? The man's gorgeous cold voice rang leisurely. His voice was flat, without the slightest hint of emotion. He got Di Zun's response. The second judicial officer felt that his words had completely stabbed a man's dignity. After all, Di Zun was such a high and mighty man. How could he accept such a fickle slut? Even if there was nothing between Yiqing Luo and the palace lord of secluded Darkness Palace. However, once this rumor was spread out, it would be a disaster. So what if she was innocent? With just a few words, he could still confuse her. How could a woman with a tarnished reputation be worthy of the divine supremacy? Second judge became even more enthusiastic. That's right, Overlord, in my opinion, a slut like Yiqing Luo should be killed, in order to maintain Overlord's prestige. She paused for a moment and suddenly flashed a slightly wretched smile. Overlord, the disciples chosen by the Linglong Palace are all good-looking and have extraordinary backgrounds. If Overlord takes a fancy to any of them, you can take them all away. At least, they will serve you more loyally than that bitch. The second judicial officer's words could be said to be extremely bold. The three judiciaries standing on the side were so frightened that they withdrew their hands. The Linglong Palace Lord also looked at the second judicial officer in astonishment. Chapter 4153. Towards the second judicial officer's actions. No one tried to stop him. With the second judicial officer diverting the Overlord's line of fire. Why not? What's more, if the second judicial officer's words could really agitate the Overlord to deal with Yiqing Luo. And among them, who could catch the Overlord's eye? That would be like a sparrow turning into a phoenix, soaring to the skies. Naturally, no one dared to say a word. As for the second judicial officers, fickle woman, vixen, slut, and so on, she only raised her eyebrows with a faint smile, without any other emotions. Her lips curled up slightly. Her long and narrow eyes rose slightly, outlining an extremely shallow cold arc. This was the second judicial officer's motive. To push the female disciple of the Linglong Palace into Dmo Xian's arms. Did she feel? Dmo Xian was so thirsty that he couldn't be choosy. Wasn't the second judicial officer's thinking a little too simple? What are you laughing at? The second judicial officer's gaze stared fiercely at Yiqing Luo. Seeing Yiqing Luo's faint smile, filled with ridicule and pity, the anger in his heart surged up. Yiqing Luo raised her eyebrows, as her long and narrow eyes curved even more. She crossed her arms and slowly walked away from Dmo Xian's arms. Under the infusion of Dmo Xian's profound energy, the internal injury which was caused by the Linglong Palace Lord was slowly recovering. That beautiful face that could topple cities also regained its color. When she raised her eyebrows and smiled, the red flame made her even more flirtatious and gorgeous. The second judicial officer was mesmerized by this smile. She's indeed a vixen. The second judicial officer's face flushed red, as he angrily tried to conceal his wavering heart because of Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo laughed softly, as her eyes squinted, quietly looking at the second judicial officer. Obviously, the distance between the two of them was considered far. and it was parallel to the ground. But the second judicial officer felt that. Yiqing Luo had a condescending feeling, looking down on her. This kind of feeling made the second judicial officer feel extremely aggrieved. Facing the second judicial officer's increasingly sinister gaze, Yiqing Luo was still smiling. Her eyes flashed, occasionally with a sharp glint. "I'm laughing at you," the second judge. The girl's clear and melodious voice was filled with ridicule. Her smile seemed to be mocking him. Without waiting for the second judicial judge to speak, the girl raised her eyebrows again. "Are you sure you won't take back what you said just now?" The second judge snorted disdainfully, "Take it back. When has the second judicial division ever retracted its words?" Yiqing Luo clicked her tongue as she had a helpless look and looked at her pitifully. "I forgot to tell you, my Xian is extremely protective of his children. Earlier those insulting words of yours had infuriated my Xian." She spread her hands and shook her head helplessly. "You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Since the second preceptor is so unyielding and refuses to take back his words, you'll have to bear the consequences." The last word, yo, Yiqing Luo could even raise the final syllable, extremely mischievous and adorable. But at this critical juncture, in the ears of the second judicial officer, it was full of contempt and mockery. Second preceptor's pupils constricted abruptly as his vision swiftly shot towards Dmo Xian. But what he met was a pair of emotionless, as though it was frozen. Just one look and he felt as if he was in an ice house, his entire body stiffened, unable to move. Chapter 41-54. As the man's voice fell on the last word, bam, a deafening explosion was heard. The crowd only saw. The palanquin of the second judicial magistrate was suddenly torn into pieces. A terrifying and valiant aura instantly exploded. This scene was extremely horrifying. The crowd watched with their own eyes. The second preceptor, who was sitting on the palanquin, was torn into pieces by that terrifying power. As though he had self-exploded. His entire body exploded. Blood and flesh splattered all over. This scene shocked everyone present as they trembled in fear, even their breathing became cautious. Second judicial officer. Second judicial officer was blown up just like that. Only small pieces of minced meat were left from the explosion. Furthermore, they didn't even see when Dmo Xian made his move. Too terrifying. The rumored overlord was simply too terrifying. Even the Linglong Palace Lord couldn't do anything to the overlord. Linglong Palace was finished. This time, Linglong Palace was really finished. Whereas at this moment, that ravishing young lady stood under the minced flesh, her expression didn't change as she shook her head helplessly. "I've said it before, my Xian is protective, but he didn't listen. Look, he lost his life in vain." Everyone was so infuriated by Yiqing Luo's shameless words that their faces contorted. This man's show-off was really complacent. What's so great about relying on a man? All right. Relying on an amazing man was really amazing. At least, it was impossible for them to rely on the overlord in this lifetime. Yiqing Luo didn't bother about what those Linglong Palace Lord's female disciples were thinking. Her line of sight turned and landed on the Linglong Palace Lord. Looking at the disheveled-looking Linglong Palace Lord who was staring at them vigilantly, Yiqing Luo's pink lips curled upwards as she walked towards the Linglong Palace Lord, step by step. Her footsteps were very light and slow. Step by step, neither too fast nor too slow. There was no sound at all. But as the young lady lifted her footsteps, the hearts of the Linglong Palace Lord's female disciples were pounding furiously. This suffocating atmosphere. The Linglong Palace Master's heart tightened. She glared at the young girl who was walking towards her, her eyes filled with malice. What do you want to do? What do I want to do? Yiqing Luo tilted her head as she laughed softly. All along, isn't it what you want to do? The face of the palace master of the Linglong Palace was slightly pale. She raised her head slightly and said, I underestimated the strength of a venerable sovereign. I am not as skilled as you. You can kill me or torture me if you want. His tone was very arrogant. Kill you? Yiqing Luo shook her finger. Killing you, isn't it freeing you? I'm not that kind. When the Linglong Palace master heard this, her serious face suddenly changed and her brows wrinkled. What do you mean? Doesn't Lord Hall Master know very well what I mean? Yiqing Luo had already walked in front of her, merely 3 steps away. If I didn't guess wrongly, to become the palace master of Linglong Palace, what you have to sacrifice is your own freedom. She tilted her head again, as though she was in deep thoughts as she smiled. So, how could I let you die? Following her words, every single word was spilled out. The expression on the Linglong Palace master's face kept changing. Yiqing Luo couldn't help but laughed as her narrow eyes curved. Chapter 4155. Yiqing Luo's eyes were slightly suffused with a faint chill. When her long and narrow eyes were raised, the corner of her eyes outlined a blossoming flame. That smile was breathtakingly beautiful. But in the eyes of the Linglong Palace master, he looked like an Asura who had crawled out of hell. Every single smile and frown revealed a chill that caused one's entire body to go cold. The Linglong Palace Lord had never encountered such a pressing pressure before. Even earlier, when he met Dmo Xian's icy sharp black eyes, he did not have such a feeling. Fear unconsciously seeped out of her eyes. When he spoke, even his voice trembled slightly. You. What do you want to do? Yiqing Luo's eyes narrowed as she looked at her disdainfully. What do you think I want to do? The Linglong Palace master pursed her lips and a cold light flashed in her eyes. She did not answer. He clenched his fists tightly. He felt humiliated. Yiqing Luo intentionally paused for a moment, admiring the Linglong Palace Lord's icy cold face, revealing such an embarrassed expression. She said nothing. Invisibly, it created even more pressure on the palace master of the Linglong Palace. The pupils of the Linglong Palace's hall master rapidly contracted. It was as if a hurricane was about to burst out of her eyes. Yiqing Luo then parted her lips slightly and said word by word, what is the purpose of Linglong Palace's existence? You, and the so-called mysterious fairy, why do you exist? Because her body was suitable, she was forced to become the next palace master of the Linglong Palace. It sounded extremely ridiculous. In the Linglong Palace, he needed to find a compatible body. There must be some sort of motive or reason behind this. Hearing Yiqing Luo's question, Linglong Palace Lord's expression froze for a moment. I don't know what you're talking about. Since you want to die so badly, you might as well tell me about it. If I'm happy, I can fulfill your wish, right? Yiqing Luo opened her mouth with a smile as her slender fingers gently caressed her lips. He looked as if he was really helping the Linglong Palace master out of kindness. The muscles on the face of the Linglong Palace Lord trembled slightly. What did he mean by letting her get what she wanted? If they could, who would want to die? If he really wanted to die, how could he have endured in the Linglong Palace for so many years? Even though he was the Linglong Palace Lord, he did not have any freedom and he could not seek death. However, if a person really wanted to die, there were thousands of ways to do so. Moreover, the Linglong Palace Lord would want her to inherit the position of the next Linglong Palace Lord in exchange for her freedom. This meant that she did not want to die at all. For a person who longed for freedom, but did not dare to, and was unwilling to die, the only way was to follow her psychological line of defense and infiltrate bit by bit. What do you think? Has Hall Master considered it? Yi Qing Luo asked with a beaming smile. That Lord Hall Master was filled with mockery. The Ling Long Palace Lord's fists were tightly clenched, and her 5 fingers were tightly interlocked together. A pair of venomous eyes seemed to be filled with ice. Her entire body tensed up, as if squeezing each word out from the gaps of her teeth. She said through gritted teeth, "What do you want to know?" Yi Qing Luo's smile deepened as she lowered her body slightly. That gorgeous face was magnified in the Ling Long Palace Lord's pupils. She smiled sweetly, the reason for the existence of the Ling Long Palace, and the standard of the body that you have your eyes on. Chapter 4156. The Ling Long Palace Master did not respond. With a sunken face, he exchanged glances with Yi Qing Luo. The storm in his eyes seemed like it was about to explode. Don't want to say it. Yi Qing Luo raised her eyebrows and dragged out the last syllable, huh? Miss Yi. At that moment, the voice of the great judge was heard. Everyone's attention was drawn to her. The great judge took a careful look at Dmo Xian before opening his mouth to speak. Miss Yi, isn't the purpose of Ling Long Palace's existence to maintain the balance of the Earth realm? If Miss Yi is unwilling to become the Ling Long Palace Master, we won't force you. No. A furious roar suddenly rang out. Ling Long Palace Lord's eyes were burning as he stared at Yi Qing Luo. It must be her. Why? The great judicial magistrate pursed his lips tightly. He really couldn't understand why the Hall Master insisted on making Yi Qing the next Hall Master. Especially in front of His Majesty, this was no different from courting death. What was the Palace Master persevering for? It wasn't just the Grand Inquisitor's doubts. This was also the doubt in the hearts of many disciples of the Ling Long Palace. Lady Yi, the Grand Judicial Magistrate's face turned pale as he looked at Yi Qing Luo, racking his brains to think of a way to help the Ling Long Palace Lord escape. This was not because she valued the Ling Long Palace Lord. Instead, the moment something happens to the Ling Long Palace Master, everyone they interact with will be blamed. The Overlord would definitely be furious for the sake of the beauty. Yi Qing Luo didn't even cast a glance at the Grand Magistrate. The smile on his lips had yet to dissipate. On the contrary, it added a treacherous arc. However, amidst the treachery, her smile became extremely sweet. What if it has to be me? It seems that Lord Palace Master does not intend to have a proper discussion with me. The storm gathering in the eyes of the Ling Long Palace Lord had already turned extremely dark. It was as if he had been forced into a corner. His 5 fingers tightened. His figure was swift as he broke through the raging waves around him. Bringing along the piercingly cold profound wave, he approached Yi Qing Luo in an aggressive manner. This action of the Ling Long Palace Master was filled with the determination to die. She did not give herself any leeway at all. It was beyond everyone's expectations. After all, Di Zun was just there. Fighting in front of Di Zun. Was he tired of living? But it happened. The Palace Lord of the Ling Long Palace did exactly that. Not only that, she had succeeded. In front of the Overlord, he had successfully pushed his palm towards Yi Qing Luo. That palm strike was completely different from the Ling Long Palace Master's strength. Instead, it was a kind of terrifying power that was close to destroying the heavens and extinguishing the earth. Yi Qing Luo's eyes sunk. He blinked his eyes in a certain direction. He quickly flipped over. Perhaps the blink of an eye had delayed him for a moment. Her figure seemed to have been sent flying by the majestic aura. The slender figure spun a few rounds in the air. Under everyone's gaze, 2 figures flew up at the same time, following the direction of the young girl. His purple robe fluttered in the wind, and his style was peerless. His black robe fluttered in the wind, and his evil aura was awe-inspiring. But, the two of them moved at the same time, but they were not as fast as the Linglong Palace Master. Just as the two of them flew up at the same time, the young girl's body fell into the hands of the Linglong Palace's Palace Master. The surroundings were filled with piercingly cold glints. The murderous aura charged towards the entire space. Yiqing Luo's shoulder was tightly gripped by 5 icy cold fingers. Chapter 4157. Linglong Palace Lord didn't stop at all. She didn't even bother to look at Dmo Xian and the Palace Lord who had already rushed over. Violent energy vibrated in the air. Profound ripples surged, blocking the path of the two. When she raised her eyes again, Linglong Palace Lord and the young lady's figures had completely disappeared from everyone's eyes. Yiqing Luo. Palace Lord's pupils constricted as he turned his head and stared at Dmo Xian, an overlord. You can't even protect your own woman. Dmo Xian's gaze didn't even look at him as his deep as ink eyes stared unblinkingly at the direction where Linglong Palace Lord and Yiqing Luo had disappeared. There was no response. The anxious Palace Lord's eyes were covered with a layer of cold intent. Dmo Xian. He had just finished his shout. A purple afterimage flashed past her eyes. Dmo Xian's figure had already disappeared. Beside her ear, there was a man's icy cold voice which was blown by the wind into Palace Lord's ears. You also know that she is this Lord's woman. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace froze on the spot. Yiqing Luo only felt a wave of light surging in front of her. The howling cold wind was like a bone scraping, fiercely blowing against her face. Everything in front of her was covered by a patch of black. She could only faintly see that surging silvery light not far ahead. As she got nearer to the direction of the surging, that hand on her shoulder was clasping harder and harder. Linglong Palace Lord seemed as though she wanted to crush her bones completely. The distance between the two of them was separated by a robe. Yiqing Luo could clearly feel the nervousness from Linglong Palace Lord, as well as the fear that arose from the bottom of her heart. Yes, fear. Yiqing Luo's lips unconsciously lifted. But moments later, Linglong Palace Lord had already brought her to their destination. What entered her eyes was a patch of empty beautiful pitch black. The most eye-catching thing was that in that pitch black, there was an obvious shape of a huge black hole. That black hole was in the shape of a vortex. As though it was in the darkness, a huge bloody mouth was opened. It was as if it wanted to devour everything in the world. He just stared at the huge black hole. Yiqing Luo felt a strong sense of discomfort. It was as if some sort of heavy energy was constantly seeping out of the black hole, suppressing the surrounding space. No, I don't know if it's an illusion. He had a feeling that this black hole was about to burst out and suppress everything in the world. Yiqing Luo's mind had just flashed past this thought. All of a sudden, the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace gave her a forceful push and retreated to the front of the gigantic black hole. Yiqing Luo staggered a little and finally stabilized her footsteps. However, the Linglong Palace's Palace Master closed in on her again and pushed her into the black hole. As she neared the black hole, Yiqing Luo felt a chill down her spine. Something cold pressed against her face. That touch, sticky and cold. It was so cold that it made one's hair stand on end. It was even more horrifying than having a poisonous snake crawling on his face. Yiqing Luo's brows twitched. He subconsciously wanted to reach out and grab the thing on his face. But in the next instant, that cold and sticky thing stuck to her hands again. Both her hands were tightly confined, totally unable to move. That disgusting feeling made Yiqing Luo's goosebumps all over. Chapter 4158. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes, trying to adapt to the scene in front of her. But, no matter how she looked around, the surroundings were still in darkness. She felt as if she was trapped in a boundless black fog. She couldn't see her fingers in front of her. Even the night vision eyes that he usually used were useless. At this moment, it had no effect at all. What on earth was going on? Just as she was pondering over it, her 4 limbs had been entangled with a sticky cold thing. It completely confined her, making her unable to move. Suddenly, Linglong Palace Lord's trembling voice was heard, "My lord, this is the next successor of Linglong Palace Lord whom you have set your eyes on." Linglong Palace Lord's tone was filled with fear and cautiousness. "My lord." Yi Qing Luo squinted her eyes. So, the thing in this black hole was the person whom Linglong Palace Lord was loyal to. Could it be this sticky cold thing that was entangled on her body? Was it created by that, my lord? Yi Qing Luo's emotions were in a whirl. But on her face, there was no change in her emotions. She was just about to find out what was hidden in this pitch-black surroundings. Suddenly, an ice-cold feeling, as if it was glued to her body, caused her to have goosebumps, and a voice that made her hair stand on end, rang in her ears. "Well done." It was just 4 words. But it made Yi Qing Luo's heart lifted. This voice. It seemed to be beside her ears. But if she listened carefully. But it seemed to be in a faraway direction. The tremors continued to reverberate in his ears. Not only was she unable to differentiate the other party's location. Even the sound was unable to differentiate the direction. Danger. Outside the black hole, Linglong Palace Lord's voice rang once again, "My lord, I have already found someone to replace me. My lord had once promised me." Speaking to this point, Linglong Palace Lord's voice quivered, as though she was trembling, as though she was in fear. But, after the quivering, as though it was for her own future, she mustered up her courage and continued, "My lord had once promised me to return me my freedom." Slave. The person behind Linglong Palace Lord actually called himself a slave. To the person hiding in the black hole, Linglong Palace, was it just a slave farm of TA? "Of course, I won't go back on my word." That cold and sticky voice sounded emotionlessly. This made the Linglong Palace master kneel on the ground in excitement. "My lord is wise." As soon as the Linglong Palace Lord's voice fell, suddenly, a blood-curdling scream was heard. Immediately following that, Yi Qing Luo's eyes suddenly lit up with silver light. The light was faint. But under this boundless darkness, there was no end in sight. At this moment, Yi Qing Luo saw clearly, the scene in front of her, under the boundless black sky. In all directions, there were strands and strands that looked like a net made of blood and bones. It was like a dense spider web. The blood bones were still dripping with sticky blood. But what shocked Yi Qing Luo the most was, not far ahead, there was a human figure in the bloody bones. As the silver light moved, the person's face was clearly illuminated. It was the palace master of the Linglong Palace. She was entwined in the bloody bones, as though she was firmly attached to the bloody bones. It was exceptionally disgusting and horrifying. Linglong Palace Lord was still screaming miserably, heart-wrenching. Chapter 4159. That sticky icy cold voice laughed sinisterly. "Since when did this god lie to you? You want freedom. Death, isn't that the biggest freedom?" No. No. I don't want to die. I don't want to die." Linglong Palace Lord's eyes widened in terror, trying to struggle. But how could she break free from the densely packed bloody bones that were imprisoning her all over her body? The more she struggled, the more the blood bones embedded into her body. as though her entire being was sucked into her blood bones. Linglong Palace Lord's expression, in the midst of her struggle, gradually became extremely twisted and horrifying. She even bared her fangs and brandished her claws towards Yiqing Luo, hoping that Yiqing Luo could save her. In front of this god, you still dare to call yourself I? Have you forgotten the rules which this god had set for you? The icy cold voice was mixed with anger. You deserve to be punished. These two words had just ended. Yiqing Luo heard Linglong Palace Lord's heart-wrenching scream. Following that, a faint silvery light enveloped her. Yiqing Luo saw. Linglong Palace Lord's body was slowly absorbed by the blood bones. Until the very end, that face which was filled with fear, pain, malevolence, distorted. Various expressions, was also sucked into the blood bones. Yiqing Luo totally didn't see clearly. How did that blood bone suck such a huge person like Linglong Palace Lord into a blood bone which was only as thick as an arm? She only knew. Linglong Palace Lord slowly became smaller in front of her eyes. And finally turned into nothingness. But Linglong Palace Lord's agonizing screams continued to ring beside her ears. The instance when Linglong Palace Lord disappeared. The silver light in the surroundings also suddenly dissipated. In front of her eyes, it turned into a patch of pitch darkness where she couldn't even see her own fingers in front of her. The densely packed blood bones which spread across the entire space also disappeared into the darkness. But that scene had already been firmly engraved in Yiqing Luo's mind. Following the descent of darkness, Yiqing Luo's heart thumped hard. The scene of Linglong Palace Lord being swallowed earlier kept replaying in her mind. Now, the thing which stuck onto her body, the thing which confined her, was that blood bone which saw earlier. That blood bone was something which sucked human flesh and blood. So, she was now imprisoned by the blood bone. In other words, he would become food for Shuegu. No, that's not right. This thought flashed past Yiqing Luo's mind. But it was instantly denied. If he was not wrong, the reason for the existence of the Linglong Palace should be because of the Lord that the Linglong Palace Master mentioned. Lao Lai and the Palace Master of the Dark Palace had also mentioned it. The Linglong Palace was a place to find a body that was compatible with the body. The so-called Empyrean fairy was just a puppet that he had raised. Yiqing Luo's eyes immediately sunk. It looked like the Linglong Palace Master had taken a liking to her and wanted her to become the next Palace Master. It should be the owner of the blood bone, which was also the meaning of the Lord that the Linglong Palace Master had mentioned. The owner of the blood bone had taken a fancy to her body. Therefore, it would not easily devour her. Little girl, this god knows. You saw it. Suddenly, a cold voice drifted into his ears. It was as if the voice beside his ears was sticky and slippery. It made one's hair stand on end. Don't worry, as long as you listen obediently, this god will not do anything to you. That voice sounded like a weird uncle who was pinching his throat and coaxing a child. It was extremely ear-piercing. Chapter 4160. Before saying the word rest assured. Could he take back the blood and bones around her before saying those two words? Was there any credibility? Before you appeared, that slave, wasn't she living well? Seemingly sensing Yiqing Luo's distrust, the gloomy voice spoke again. So to say, as long as someone appears to replace me, I will be the next one. Yiqing Luo couldn't help but laugh when she heard that. The owner of this blood bone was really interesting. In front of her, he sucked the Linglong Palace Lord dry. And now he even used the Linglong Palace Lord as an example. Was this a threat? Or a threat? Based on your aptitude. In a short period of time, there is no one who can replace you. That gloomy voice laughed coldly. Yiqing Luo's lips twitched as she was filled with ridicule. Then in the end, I will still be replaced, isn't it? If you don't want to be replaced, then work hard to become a good slave. The gloomy voice sounded as though it was a matter of course. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes slightly, as she slowly relaxed her body and emotions, as she replied, I have never been a slave before. If there isn't any benefit that is enough to attract me, then I will be very unwilling. That's right. That voice spoke confidently, you have the honor to become this god's slave, is this not enough to attract you? Become the Linglong Palace Lord and the entire Linglong Palace will be yours. I really can't attract you, I don't even know who you are. Yiqing Luo replied indifferently, I don't have much interest in the Linglong Palace. Her tone was obviously filled with a sense of probing. Not knowing if that person didn't hear it or was too confident of himself. But his reply was very straightforward, this god is the God Realm Supreme God. God Realm. Supreme God. What the hell? Yiqing Luo expressed a dazed look, with a blank look. Yiqing Luo's reaction obviously didn't satisfy the owner of the Blood Bone's pride as the other party's tone suddenly became heavier, God Realm. This god is the God Realm Supreme God. Yiqing Luo's eyelashes fluttered as an undetectable cold arc flashed past her eyes. This small reaction made Yiqing Luo easily guess the other party's character. It was obvious that he had always been proud of his family's status. In his eyes, he was the god who ruled over all things in the world, and everyone else was just slaves and trash in his eyes. There wasn't much change on Yiqing Luo's face as she pretended to be puzzled. Divine Realm. You mean, the divine realm of the upper realm? Are there really gods in the God Realm? How could a god appear in the land and hide behind the Linglong Palace? After asking a few questions, Yiqing Luo seemed as though she couldn't even convince herself as she clicked her tongue, I don't believe you. As expected, the blood bones wrapped around his body tightened their grip. It was the feeling of forcibly stabbing into her flesh. The blood bone was sharp, as if it wanted to fuse with her flesh. A lowly slave like you dares to question this god's words. The cold and sticky voice suddenly became cold and treacherous. Yiqing Luo was in so much pain that her entire body felt like it was being dismembered and her forehead was oozing with cold sweat. Why can't I doubt you? If what you said is true, how could you have such a big reaction? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.